Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Gets a Quirk He Never Asked For? A special shout out to the original creator, InnocentBystander, KitKateC. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The ground rattles with the force of another trade of superhuman blows. Izuku stumbles with the impact, fingers gripping the railing of the old fire escape he clings to. Mr. Midoriya Izuku, UA would like to thank you for your application to our illustrious place of learning. It's insane. This is insane. When he first took it upon himself to find the location where the League of Villains had taken Bakugo, it was under the impression that the police and UA hadn't known where to look. As you are aware, this past year, UA has opened its hallowed halls to children of all walks of life, including quirkless individuals. The press conference being held by the Eraserhead and Principal Nezu was a convenient distraction. Surely it would be the perfect time to sneak out of his room and to scope out Camino Ward. Imagine his surprise when the heroes had the same idea. Apparently they're more competent than Izuku gave them credit for. However, we are afraid to inform you that this only extends to our general education program. Only not enough, All Might had charged in headfirst and spooked them, and now Bakugo was. Swearing, Izuku continues his climb up the fire escape to the top of the next building. On the ground below, hundreds of people swarm away from the cataclysmic fight. But he's headed into it. Where Bakugo must be, because All Might all but flew in this direction after Bakugo was spirited away. After an explosion rocked the very foundations of Camino Ward. While we are more than happy to accommodate your abilities, we will not be able to process your application for the heroics portion of the entrance exams. Muscles screaming, he hauls himself up the last few flights of stairs and onto the rooftop, then jogs over to the edge. Shit. Before him, a scene ripped straight from old-world Quirk movies plays out. An ugly, gaping crater unfolds like a festering wound in the ward's landscape. News helicopters hover around it, flies drawn by the stench of death, and shine lights on the symbol of peace and the monster he's fighting. On Bakugo at the center of it all. Nor will we be able to accept an application for our business or support courses. All Might looks bad. Really, really bad. And for all that he despises the man, for all that he rejects him, Izuku can't help but feel despair at the sight of the number one hero. Battered, bruised, fighting for his life. He watches, frozen in place, as the mysterious villain charges forward. He rears back a grotesque limb, bloated and unnatural. It cuts through the air like a fleshy scythe, its trajectory aimed straight for Bakugo. Izuku screams, "Kaken!" No. But his voice is ripped away by the wind. Faster than Izuku can register, All Might's there. It's jerky, slower than he's ever moved, but he's there. He moves between Bakugo and the villain and flings him away. Bakugo goes flying off somewhere. Probably hurt, definitely freaked out, but safe. Izuku has about half a second of sharp relief before the blow hits All Might. The sound is stomach-churning. The oversized arm slams into his ribcage. And even from up here Izuku can see blood fly from the number one's mouth. The blow lands, but the momentum just carries. Like All Might weighs nothing, like he's made of flimsy plastic. In the blink of an eye, All Might is torn from the ground and sent hurtling away. Straight into the building that Izuku's perched on. The roof beneath him heaves a great shudder, and then... Should you wish to resubmit an application for the general education track, our admissions office is taking applications until the end of May. UA High School. Admissions Department. Then there's no roof beneath his feet at all. Izuku comes to dazed. There's the smell of iron in the air around him and something heavy on his back. He tries to move his legs and is met with a wave of fresh pain. He screams, but dust coats his throat and it turns into a hacking cough. His vision swims. Shadows dance before him, cut by beams of bright light. In the distance he can hear helicopter blades. Where is he? Young man. It takes a moment for the shapes in front of him to make sense. Most of it is rock, rubble? Did the building fall down? But there's something else. Someone else. His brain struggles to understand the figure in front of him. Oh, Might? But that doesn't make any sense. Why is All Might here? He hasn't seen the hero since. Are you the vigilante that's been causing trouble in this area the last 4 months? Maybe. Young man, you know vigilantism is illegal? You can't be much older than a middle schooler, surely you'd do well applying for a hero program. Izuku stares, dumbstruck at his childhood hero. The comment stabs at him, but he does his best to ignore it. Why's All Might, sir, but... He shakes his head, rising to his feet. Now is not the time to be fanboying. He's been caught red-handed by the last person he'd ever expect to run into in downtown Mizudafu at 2 in the morning. He gestures to the would-be thief that dangles unconscious in All Might's grasp. He'd already caught the guy, but just as he was tying him up for the police to grab him, suddenly the hero appeared. What was he doing so far from Tokyo? But this area is notorious for the lack of hero patrols. Someone had to step up and no one has for months. Crime has been going down significantly since I started patrolling here, he babbles, acutely aware of how much he's talking. He pauses, taking a deep breath, and technically, it's not illegal for me to help. I'm quirkless, so it's not vigilantism. I actually tried to apply but I got rejected. All Might doesn't frown, but his smile does go hard. Flinty. Izuku flinches. He feels his heart sink before his hero even opens his mouth. Young man, All Might says again, and Izuku snaps out of it. He blinks, feeling his face go numb. The man in front of him is the symbol of peace, but he's deflated. He's hunched over in front of Izuku, but half of him looks emaciated. Skeletal. Blood is gushing from a wound in his side and down his mouth. This isn't the #1 hero, this is a dying man. I don't know what you were doing here, my boy, but I must impart something to you. This villain, I'm not going to make it out of this fight, Ollie. He breaks off into a wet cough. Blood flecks on the floor in front of him and Izuku wants to scream, wants to cry, but he doesn't have the strength for it. This can't be real. This can't be happening. All Might can't die. The hero jerks forward painfully, a grimace on his half-sunken face. Shakily, he raises a fist to his lips and swipes a thumb over them. It comes away in a smear of blood. Izuku can't do anything but watch through glazed eyes as the #1 hero brings his bloodied fist forward. Izuku tries feebly to move away, nearly gags when it brushes across his mouth. On instinct he purses his lips, tasting iron on his tongue. I'm sorry, I should have chosen before now. But no one seemed right. My quirk is yours now. You cannot die, young man. Hang in there. I must end this while I still can. What the hell does that even mean? He tries to move, tries to speak, but he just can't. All Might stares at him through sunken blue eyes and smiles, but it's all wrong. The hero stands, seemingly with great effort, and Izuku can only watch as his half-deflated body surges back. With a groan he reaches around Izuku. There's the sound of shifting concrete. He can only assume that he's been freed of the rubble, but he still can't feel anything aside from bone-deep ache. His vision dims. No, stay awake, he thinks, pleads with his body, now is not the time to pass out. He barely manages to raise his eyelids. All Might is gone. Somewhere beyond the ruin he hears a ferocious roar. United States of Thmas. There's a tremendous tremor and a blast of pressurized air. And then all Izuku knows is darkness. Kaken pauses just outside the threshold of the classroom door, the back of his gakuren creasing as he straightens up, and with a casual smirk, throws a look over his shoulder. Like it's just a passing thought. You want to be a hero so bad? I've got a time-saving idea for you. If you think you'll have a quirk in your next life, go take a swan dive off the roof. Kaken punctuates the thought with an ugly, snorting laugh and slams the door closed behind him. The thud is muted by the classroom walls, but the sound still rattles him. Izuku stares at the door. Somewhere deep inside him, something snaps. He's not really sure how he winds up outside on the ground level of the school, crouched over the poorly kept koi pond with his waterlogged notebook in his hands. But he does. He stares with hollow eyes at the title, Hero Analysis for the Future, and tries to feel something. Anything. But wait. He's been here before. He remembers. That horrible day, he realized that Kaken wasn't truly his friend, that he hadn't been for a long time. He remembers standing at the koi pond in front of the school and staring at the cover of his notebook. Hours passing by in the blink of an eye. Mom calling him and asking where he was because there was a villain attack at the convenience store by Aldra. Going home, where the letter was waiting to find him. He remembers, and the vision of the koi pond wavers. Izuku blinks. When he opens his eyes, it's to a place he unfortunately recognizes. He's in a gray, colorless room with no windows. The wall he's facing looks to be a plexiglass of some sort, and he's seated at a fold-out table. He doesn't need to look down to know that his hands are cuffed to the table. He's been somewhere like here before. Twice, actually. Izuku takes a mental catalog of his person. His clothes from earlier are missing, replaced with a soft white gown, along with his pants and, consequently, his phone. Did they patch me up at a hospital and send me straight to the precinct? The sound of a lock clicks through the room and Izuku's eyes zero in on the sound. In the far left corner, the room's single door opens, and in steps one of the most haggard men Izuku has ever seen. His posture is hunched, his face gaunt, and the beginnings of a 5 o'clock shadow frames his jaw. Izuku eyes him wearily. The man stares back. "You're awake," he says, walking over to the side of the table opposite to Izuku. "Good. Let's get this over with. Who are you?" Izuku says, eyeing the recorder the man pulls from the pocket of his coat and sits on the table. "Which station am I in? And while you're at it, why am I here? Is it protocol to put innocent bystanders in interrogation after a villain attack?" The man folds his hands together on the table's surface, his thumbs fidgeting. "My name is Detective Tsukachi. I'm with the Tokyo Police Force. We had a skilled healer fix up the majority of your injuries. You may feel some slight fatigue though. Allow me to cut to the chase. You're here because when rescue teams went in to comb through the wreckage of Camino, one of the officers at the scene recognized you from a vigilante arrest several months back. Not a vigilante." There's a faint click, and Izuku looks around. Is there a clock behind him or something? He dismisses the thought. Not important. "Excuse me? Under Japan's quirk laws, I'm not considered a vigilante," he says, focusing back on Detective Tsukachi. "I'm quirkless, detective. It's why both times I was caught they let me go. Quirkless or not, you're a repeat offender of disturbing the peace and interfering with hero jurisdiction who just so happened to be at the scene of Japan's most destructive act of terrorism in the last 10 years. Detective Tsukachi frowns and leans in. "That's why you're here." Izuku scowls. "You think I was working with them?" "I don't know," the detective says, settling back in his seat. "You tell me, Midoriya." He grits his teeth. "Seriously? Don't they have better things to do than harass a quirkless high schooler?" "Fine. I wasn't working with supervillains." At this, the detective's brow seems to smooth over marginally. He tilts his head and sighs. "All right then, what were you doing at Camino Ward?" "Taking a walk." In front of him, Tsukachi purses his lips. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not. I was out on a jog. I've been trying to get out more lately. You know, since I had to drop my main source of exercise. Getting my steps in, taking in the nightlife, then boom. Earthquakes, screaming, a building falling down on me. A building detective. Honestly, it's a little insensitive that you're making me relive such a traumatic experience." "Midoriya," Detective Tsukachi rubs his face. "Please. I'm not an idiot. I'd appreciate it if you'd stop making things up. I've had a long enough night as it is." The bags beneath his eyes are almost enough to make him feel guilty. "Almost. I don't know what you mean. I'm telling you the truth." All right, he must be hearing things. Maybe they didn't patch him up as well as they thought? "No, you're really not. And you can prove that how?" "Look, I know it feels a lot like I'm the bad guy here. But trust me when I say the last thing I want to do is lock a kid away for being affiliated with All Might's murder. So if you could..." The rest of Tsukachi's words fade into white noise. Izuku feels his stomach drop through the soles of his feet. All Might's murder? All Might's dead. He blurts, interrupting the detective. Tsukachi pauses. After a stretch of silence, he answers. Yes. I didn't. Izuku's gaze drops to where his hands are cuffed to the table. I didn't know that. Detective Tsukachi speaks slowly. Cautiously, like he's addressing someone fragile. Izuku hates it. I know you weren't just out for a jog, Midoriya. Why were you really there last night? Dimly, his brain clocks that it's been at least half a day since Camino Ward. Half a day since he's apparently been out of it. He stuffs that information away and looks up. Detective Tsukachi has his hands splayed out in front of him, pensive. For whatever reason, this man is convinced that Izuku was there for less than legal reasons. And he's right to doubt him. Izuku was there as more than a bystander. Just not the less than legal reasons the detective seems to believe. He's reluctant to admit the actual motive for him being there. Under normal circumstances he would fess up. The laws haven't changed since the last time Izuku's had a run-in with the police, but being there for the number one hero's death was a lot more incriminating than normal. If there's a surefire way to get the detective to believe that he was there as a separate entity from the League, he might be able to tell the truth and move on with his life. But how to guarantee that? How to know for certain that if he tells the truth, they'll send the quirkless kid who stepped out of place back home and not straight to Tartarus? Tsukachi seems confident in his ability to determine whether or not he's lying, but how far does that confidence go? What's backing it? Years of experience or something else? A quirk perhaps? I was on a walk, like I said. Next thing I know, the building fell down. He lies. Is there a clock in here? Tsukachi squints. No, there isn't. Don't change the subject. Try again. Interesting. You said you had a healer fix me up? No brain damage or anything. Midoriya. What? Just making sure. I'm feeling a little off. Want me to answer to the best of my abilities, don't you? This time, Izuku's listening for the sound until it's coming from Tsukachi. Is he clicking his tongue? So it's been him the entire time. A nervous tick maybe? He doesn't seem to be aware of it. Could it be a response to some kind of external stimuli? So far he's only clicked when he was through telling a lie. He trains his face to keep still at the realization. In his seat, Detective Tsukachi sits a little straighter. I can assure you that the doctor who healed you gave you a clean bill of health. You don't have any persisting damage. Now if you could please answer my question, truthfully. Okay, fine. I was there because I followed All Might. He listens for another cue, but all the detective does is nod. Why? Because he's the best. What fanboy wouldn't follow after All Might? Another click. Okay. Lie detector quirk it is, then. Tsukachi opens his mouth to say something, but Izuku beats him to it. Yeah, I know you don't believe me. I was following him because I figured he was headed to where Bakugo was. He has to bite his cheek from snorting at the look of surprise on the man's face. Definite lie detector. Bakugo Katsuki? Loud, abrasive, explosion quirk. That Bakugo Katsuki, yes. Is he okay by the way? He may be putting up a facade for the detective, but if he learns that two of the most important formative people in his life were taken out in one night, he might just burst into tears. Compartmentalize, Izuku, compartmentalize. Now is not the time to break down. The detective seems to gather himself and sits back in his chair. Yes. We got the same doctor to take care of his injuries. He's safe. Oh, thank God. So you were at Camino Ward to look for Bakugo Katsuki. Care to elaborate on that? Satisfied that he at least don't be arrested for assisted murder and kidnapping, Izuku relents. Sure. He's a childhood friend. Sort of. Kind of. Well, he was until we turned 4 and he got his quirk. Then having me around made him look weak, or whatever. Izuku shrugs. He went to UA to become a hero, and I stayed back and became a troubled youth. When I heard he'd been kidnapped, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So when UA started the conference, I went out to look for him. Tsukachi raises an eyebrow. And you just wound up at Camino? Your police car envoy wasn't exactly subtle. I followed All Might after they broke down the wall to that hideout or whatever. You couldn't just leave your friend's rescue to the pros? He scoffs. In my experience, the pros are fairly unreliable. Is that all? Can you let me go now with a warning or whatever? I want to go home. The detective purses his lips. Almost. Just one more thing. I couldn't ask before, but I can with some security now. Tsukachi leans forward. Izuku follows his hand, watching as it comes forward to turn off the recorder. That's concerning. Tsukachi tucks the device into the pocket of his coat and clears his throat. One of the helicopters on the scene captured footage of the building in the minutes after it collapsed. It shows All Might lifting some rubble away, speaking to someone, speaking to you. For some reason, Izuku's pulse ticks up. He does his best to appear calm despite the rapid beating of his heart. Midoriya, I cannot stress enough how important this final question is. I need you to answer truthfully and to the best of your ability. Did All Might say or do anything to you? Can you remember anything at all? Suddenly the cuffs on his wrists feel tight, like they're cutting off circulation. He licks his lips. Did All Might say or do anything to him? He thinks so, but it's hard to remember. Everything after the building fell is hazy. Something about a quirk? I think? Izuku closes his eyes, wills himself to recall. I remember blood? My blood, obviously, but also his. There was a lot of it. So much. From his side, from his mouth. Splattering the floor. He shivers. I think he may have gotten some on me. In my mouth? He lets out a weak chuckle and it sounds fake even to him. But did All Might have super herpes or something? Opening his eyes, Izuku stiffens when he sees the expression on Detective Tsukachi's face. It's like he's seeing a ghost. But detective? Knock knock knock. The two of them jump when a series of sharp knocks sound at the door. Hardly a second passes before it's flung open, and in strides the last person Izuku expected to meet today. Sasaki, the detective says, rising to his feet, what are you doing here? I'm covering his interrogation. And I'm here to make sure you do your job, Sir Nighteye says, shrewd eyes locking onto Izuku. If he was the same person he was a year ago, Izuku would have turned into a gibbering fanboy mess. As it is, he's immediately wary of the way the late number one's former sidekick is looking at him, to make sure that this delinquent is dealt with accordingly. Dealt with? Izuku says, wrinkling his nose. The detective heaves a world-weary sigh. Sasaki, a word. 1 minute. What Naomasa wants, more than anything in the world right now, is 1 minute where he's not caught in an absolute shitstorm. But no, apparently the universe has other plans, as if losing his best friend wasn't enough for 24 hours. Naomasa shuts the door to the interrogation room, leaving Midoriya Izuku once more by himself. Not completely, of course. They can still see him, looking very upset and very confused at the table in the other room through the one-way glass. He turns his attention to the self-important hero standing behind him. Would you like to explain how you got here? Sasaki sniffs. Please. Your people owe me enough favors for all the problems my agency has solved in this city. Getting into your little interrogation room was child's play. And you saw fit to interrupt my interrogation because? I'm a literal lie detector, Sasaki. If there's anything you can trust me with, it's this. This one thing. Your quirk is hardly infallible. I think it's reasonable to want to have two pros on the case when dealing with a situation like this. Folding his arms, Naomasa gives him the nastiest look he can muster on 3 hours of sleep and 2 pots of coffee. You don't think I can handle this? He's a child. That child, Sasaki points at the glass, is an experienced villain. Quirkless or not, he is a menace. Have you seen his case file? Yes, but I have a feeling you're going to, oh yep, there you go. Sasaki proceeds to pull out a manila file from inside his suit jacket and slaps it on the table next to the intercom. It's the very same one Naomasa looked at not in 3 hours ago, before Recovery Girl deemed him stable enough to transfer to the precinct for questioning. At first glance its size is innocuous. Inside are exactly 2 police reports. One having been filled out by Toshinori himself 10 months ago in downtown Mizudafu, where the kid was taken in for incapacitating a would-be ATM thief. The other is 4 months ago, filed by Endeavor, when he managed to knock out the hero killer. Honestly, it had been the latter that convinced him to take Midoriya into police custody. A person capable of that had to be held under scrutiny. He wouldn't have been the first slighted citizen to turn down the path of villainy. He's seen it too many times. Just 2 police reports, but you'd have to be either naive or blind to believe that that's all Midoriya Izuku had done over the last year or so. For a kid to take down such a big-name villain? It couldn't have been a fluke. The kid sitting in the other room was a practiced vigilante, whether the law acknowledged it or not. And now he was Toshi's successor. There's a reason why he was there last night, Tsukachi. I know it. He's working with those scum. He's partly responsible for Yagi-san's. For All Might's, Naomasa almost feels pity for the man when he chokes, fist slamming down onto the file. There's a desperate gleam in his eyes. The rest of All for One's little cronies got away. I refuse to let this one escape as well. Naomasa combs a hand through his hair. He sighs. Sasaki. Listen, Midoriya wasn't with the League. He was there for Bakugo, to rescue him. Apparently they grew up together. The kid was worried. And you're sure of that? Positive. I had him clarify repeatedly just in case. It's almost like this is my job or something. We can corroborate his claim with the Bakugos, if you're that worried about it. Very well. But then you won't mind if I have you clarify with a few questions of my own? Why was he always like this? Why couldn't he just cooperate this one time? Pinching his nose, Naomasa sighs. Hey, look. You want to cement it in your mind that the kid didn't have anything to do with Toshi's death? Fine, you do that because very soon we're going to have to be working with him towards a compromise or something. What the hell does that mean, Tsukachi? It means, Naomasa says, with all the wit of the severely sleep-deprived, that our little delinquent here is the newest holder of One for All. You give it back. For the second time in 30 minutes, Izuku's soul leaves his body as the door to the interrogation room is flung open. Sir Nighteye is fuming, anger rolling off him in waves, and Izuku can't help but feel like he's about to be struck when the hero storms over to him. He flinches, instinctively raising his hands up to protect his face, but the cuffs keep them chained to the table. Thankfully, the hero stops several paces from him with his hands curled into fists at his side. He looks absolutely livid. Izuku stutters. What? All Might's Quirk, the man hisses, cutting him with a furious glare, the one you conned him into giving you. Give it back right now. Izuku looks at him like he's grown 2 heads. Detective? He says, straining to look behind the hero at the disgruntled detective standing in the doorway. What's he talking about? Should I be worried about getting assaulted? Detective Tsukachi crosses the room, takes Sir Nighteye by the shoulders and wrenches him away. Jesus, Sasaki, you're a hero, act like it. I will act like it when this thief explains how he managed to trick the symbol of peace into giving him his quirk. He twists out of Tsukachi's grip and stomps over to the empty seat across from Izuku. With a huff, he wrestles it from beneath the table and sits down. I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers. So my apologies, he says, turning to look up at the detective. I'm still lost here. Can either of you explain? All Might couldn't have given me a quirk. That should be impossible. It has to be, right? He's been quirkless all of his life, branded as subhuman. An outcast. To suddenly receive something so life-altering shouldn't be able to happen so easily, so quickly. Right? I'm quirkless. All Might didn't give me anything, right? Instead of the answer Izuku's looking for, the detective deflates. Impossibly, he looks even more tired than before. I'm going to go grab a second chair. Sasaki, be civil. In the small space of the interrogation room at the Tokyo precinct, tucked away from the chaos of the outside world, Midoriya Izuku learns about one of the best-kept secrets in Japan, and how he was apparently forced into having a role in it. When Detective Tsukachi finishes speaking, when his voice runs hoarse and the tide of unbelievable information stops, Izuku stares blankly down at his cuffed hands. At his hands, scarred and calloused from the year of training and, until recently, his vigilante career. The hands that hold strength he's worked so hard to cultivate, so hard to achieve, so that he could prove to the world and to himself that being quirkless was no less limiting than any other minor inconvenience anyone could suffer. They look so familiar, except that now, lurking beneath his skin, is a power that he never once asked for. Forced onto him by All Might, the hero that spat on his ambitions. who apparently was a massive fucking hypocrite, who probably didn't even realize the irony of his last will. Izuku stares at his hands, and an uncomfortable silence settles over the room. Sir Knight clucks, "Well? Don't you have anything to say?" He probably didn't even recognize me. At Camino, he grits his teeth. He brought me in that one time, in downtown Mizudafu. He knew I wanted to be a hero and told me I couldn't because I was quirkless, only he was quirkless too. If he would have wanted to give it to me before, it would have been then. Exactly, comes Sir Nighteye's irritated baritone, it was an act of desperation. He already had a successor lined up, handpicked by myself, but he didn't have the chance to turn it over. He clearly wasn't in his right mind, so you're going to give it back? White-hot anger flashes across his vision, and he looks up to meet the hero's sneer. Apparently, he didn't hold your opinion all that highly, because he told me that no one seemed right? I call bull, you lying little miscreant. He's telling the truth, the detective says quietly, and the hero throws him a disbelieving look. You honestly expect me to believe the word of? So what happens to me now? Izuku interrupts, looking over at Tsukachi. I don't particularly want All Might's quirk, and it sounds like you have someone in mind to take it. But clearly this is a pretty big secret to be in on. What'll happen if I cooperate? If you cooperate? Are you suggesting? Sasaki. Detective Tsukachi cuts with a fierce look. I'm not above having you escorted off the premises. The hero snaps his mouth shut, leaning back against his chair and folding his arms. He looks supremely displeased, but he doesn't say a word. Tsukachi stares as if daring him to say something else. When he doesn't, the detective turns back to Izuku. Tsukachi might be his favorite member of law enforcement he's had the displeasure of dealing with. Should you cooperate, All Might's quirk will be passed on to its intended inheritor and you'll be quirkless again. None of the previous one for all users have experienced negative side effects from giving the quirk away, so it'll be as if you never had the quirk in the first place. Humming thoughtfully, Izuku taps his fingers together. Alright. Awesome. Personally, I was just fine without a quirk, so that sounds good to me. In his chair, Tsukachi straightens up a bit and Sir Nighteye smirks. Excellent. I'll call my agency and have All Might's rightful successor brought in immediately. The hero rises from his seat, straightening his glasses. I'll just be a moment. Slow down, let's not be too hasty. I have a request. Sir Nighteye stops mid-stride. What? A request? Request? I'm sure you're familiar with the word, Izuku drawls. By dint of All Might's impeccable planning skills, I've been roped into what sounds to be a massive state secret. Actually, scratch that. The fact that I'm being held in such a low-security location leads me to believe that not even the Safety Commission is privy to the nature of All Might's quirk. Am I wrong? Detective Tsukachi purses his lips, but it's Sir Nighteye that answers. Incredibly. We're paid by the Safety Commission, you think we keep secrets from them? From the corner of his eye, Izuku catches the faintest movement. It's the detective again, shifting in place. Izuku keeps a placid face. This fucker. Sure. Whatever. I'll just get to the point, I want immunity. Tsukachi opens his mouth to answer, but Sir Nighteye answers instead. Immunity? You heard me. Immunity. I want a guarantee, in writing, that once I hand over the quirk, I can walk away untouched. You get your rightful successor, I get my freedom, and we can go on our merry way ignoring each other's existence. Sir Nighteye growls, Oh? I bet you'd like that, wouldn't you, vigilante? Izuku deadpants, not a vigilante. Sasaki, the detective says, rubbing his temples, some tact, please. Midoriya, I think that sounds more than reasonable. Sir Nighteye stands abruptly from his seat and strides towards the door without a backwards glance. Tsukachi, outside. Now, he punctuates his exit with a slam of the door. Izuku almost feels bad for the detective, who stares after him with so much exhaustion on his face. I'll be right back. Again. I don't trust him, I don't care what your quirk says. I refuse to give him immunity. Sasaki whirls on him before Naomasa even lets go of the doorknob. He scowls. Why not? It's a fair trade for Toshi's quirk, isn't it? You're going to sit there and tell me that that child is entirely without fault? Without suspicion? That you seriously believe, for a single instance, that he just happened to be there to receive Yagi-san's quirk? Folding his arms, Sasaki snorts, please. All for One is the most cunning villain to have existed in 200 years. He is more than capable of such a plant. No, Midoriya Izuku is not being granted immunity. He's transferring the quirk to Mirio, and then he's getting a one-way ticket to Tartarus? For whatever reason, the fraying string that's been keeping Naomesa's emotions in check decides that moment to snap completely. Throwing his hands up, he all but yells. And what gives you the right to decide that? He's a child, Sasaki, for fuck's sake. The poor kid has been through enough. I let you stay here out of respect for our relationship to Toshinori, but may I remind you, this. Like it or not, I have the final say in what happens here, and I say enough lives have been ruined for the day. He's getting immunity. You're getting the quirk. To make his point, Naomesa swivels around and gets a hand on the doorknob. End of story. But Sasaki is faster, damn him, and knocks his hand away, grabbing him by the wrist and spinning him back to face him. And may I remind you, detective, he hisses, that I have been in on this secret for much longer than anyone here. You may have been Yagi-san's friend, but I was his partner for years before you came along. I have personally seen to it that One for All's secret has been kept a secret for 2.5 decades, and I will not see you throw away all of our hard work because you have developed a soft spot for a vigilante. Naomesa yanks his wrist back, staring hatefully up at the hero. Sasaki stares back, unflinching. I will not hesitate to pull seniority over you on this, Tsukachi. If you cooperate with me now, I can promise that Midoriya won't spend his entire life in Tartarus. Just long enough for Mirio to get control over the quirk, and for the dust to settle over this incident. If not, I give you my personal guarantee that he won't see the light of day again. So what will it be? Every fiber of his being is screaming at him to punch Sasaki in his pointed little face. In the end, after a tense silence, Naomesa keeps his hands under control. You're unbelievable. Toshi would be disgusted with you. To his credit, so he isn't made entirely of stone, Sasaki flinches. Well, Yagi-san's not here, is he? Izuku eyes the two adults entering the room, keeping his mouth shut until they both take their seats once more. The detective appears visibly aged. That can't be a good sign. So, he says slowly, once they're both seated, am I getting my immunity? Sir Nighteye nods, his eyes masked by the glare of his glasses. Of course. We'll get the papers in order and signed as soon as the quirk is successfully transferred. Izuku sucks in a breath. So they're doing this, huh? Wonderful. All right, I think I'll keep the quirk, thanks. What? Midoriya? Izuku picks at his nails like they're the most concerning thing in the room. Why wouldn't I, when you're lying through your teeth? Don't? Izuku snaps, letting some of his anger seep into his voice. Detective Tsukachi closes his mouth. Don't sit there and lie to me. I'm a teenager, not an idiot. I know you have a lie-detecting quirk. Your tongue clicks whenever it goes off. I'm assuming you have no control over whether or not it's activated, considering you've been clicking when Sir Nighteye lies, too. I'm sure it comes in real handy when you're in the field. It serves as a way to keep your colleagues up to speed, right? It's pretty subtle. I'm sure that outside of a controlled environment I wouldn't have been able to hear it if I wasn't listening for it. And don't try to tell me you have someone on the other side of that mirror telling you when I'm lying or not. There's no means of transmitting sound on you or in this room, otherwise you wouldn't have bothered with turning off the recorder earlier. Your paranoia is telling. So, leaning in, Izuku shoots Sir Nighteye his most charming smile. The hero looks like he's about to pop a blood vessel. Now that we're all being honest with each other, mind telling me what your actual plans for me are? Tsukachi stammers. Tartarus. Izuku turns to look at the hero. For life. Or less, if you are to cooperate. Sir Nighteye looks at him like something he scraped off the sole of his shoe, but Detective Tsukachi doesn't click. Not for the first time, Izuku wishes his hands weren't cuffed together. He goes to fold his hands, but settles for leaning forward instead. Interesting. Tell me, sir, do you really want to see the last remnant of your precious mentor rotting away in a prison cell? He takes supreme delight in the hero shooting to his feet, chair clattering to the floor behind him. The following silence is loud. Izuku continues. Let me tell you what I think. I think that you want this quirk more than I do. I've long accepted my quirklessness, and honestly my life would be a whole lot simpler without it. Unfortunately, the same is not the same for you. I think that you heroes left all of society's peace of mind and stability resting on the shoulders of one man, and now that one man is gone, along with what sounds to be the boogeyman of Japan. And now that both of them are gone, you find yourself with two major power vacuums. Your symbol of peace is shattered, and as of right now, you're scrambling to pick up the pieces. Did I get that all right? Sir Nighteye manages to pick his jaw up off the floor. You have some nerve. Izuku tuts. You know, I'm glad I was able to stop Stain. He was a dangerous man with dangerous ideals. However, he wasn't entirely off the mark with his beliefs. You heroes put too much stock into one person, and now you're up shit creek without a paddle. Sure, you could lock me away in Tartarus forever, sweep your little secret and all mights fuck up under the rug. But I know that you can't afford to do that. You don't just want my quirk, you need it. Izuku smiles and it's all razor blades. So, I'm keeping it. And we're going to sit here, and you're going to stop lying, and we're going to find a solution that doesn't involve me going to prison. Sound good? Principal Nezu sits in his office, typing diligently away on his computer. So much has happened in the last 24 hours, so many game-changing incidents that will change you, not to mention Japan, forever. He's up to his ears in problems. Coming up with a last-minute dorm system for the students, writing up parent permission slips, dealing with the media fallout, handling his staff, and, probably the most pressing, finding out what to do with the vigilante that almost certainly has the late number one's quirk. Despite the fact that they have all for one in custody, at the very least, All Might was triumphant in that, the rest of the league is still very much at large. They still haven't the slightest clue as to what happened to the Nomu in the warehouse, nor have any information on the person responsible for creating them. Nezu wouldn't put it past the criminal mastermind to have a contingency plan in wake of his capture, so it's imperative that they begin the training for the next one-for-all holder at once. One thing at a time. We will prevail. He's deep into considering the logistics of having Cementos create a new dorm system when his office phone rings. It's an unknown ID, but a number. He has memorized. Detective Tsukachi has been an immense help in the past. Hopefully, he has good news to report. Why, Detective? Nezu answers cheerfully into the phone. I do hope you have some good news, but given that you're calling at, he looks to his desktop clock. My goodness, 3 a.m, I'm assuming that it may be something different, Nezu, hello. The detective sounds dead on his feet. We have a unique situation on our hands. I think. Nezu gives him a few seconds, but there's only silence. Frowning, he says into the receiver. Hello? Detective? Are you quite all right? There's a heavy sigh on the other end. Yes, sorry. It's just, you were right, Midoriya has it. I think you're going to want to talk to the kid. He has a proposal. For some reason, a shiver runs up Nezu's back, sending his fur on end. Biting back a smile, he replies, Oh? Put him on the phone. Shoyuta collapses into the driver's seat of his car, pulling the door closed heavily behind him. He braces his hands on the steering wheel and wonders exactly how much force he'd need to slam his head on the horn hard enough for the airbags to deploy and knock him unconscious. He could probably snag at least an hour of sleep before Recovery Girl could revive him. Nezu would almost certainly send him back to the school, and then he wouldn't have to deal with handling the problem child the bastard is dumping on him. Because Shoyuta isn't dealing with enough already, right? I don't know what you're thinking, but I feel the need to remind you that you used up most of your sick days recovering from the USJ incident. Speak of the devil. Shoyuta turns his head just enough to give the principal of UA the stink eye as he hops into the passenger seat and clicks his seatbelt in. I could just quit, he says, sitting up to buckle himself. Come now, Eraser. Both of us know you'd never do that, especially now of all times. Besides, today hasn't been all that bad. Not that be, have they even been in the same company for the past 6 hours? The Yaoyorisis threatened to sue us for negligence. But they didn't? We just had a 30-minute conversation with the Kirishimas that was mostly the poor kid just crying. He ticks off his fingers for emphasis. The Idas wouldn't even speak to me, and the Minetas pulled him from the school. Nezu hums and waves his hand. Pa. So focused on the negatives. You forgot to mention how well our chat with the Bakugas went, all things considered. And why are you counting the Minetas as a negative? You were planning on expelling him anyways, they just saved you extra paperwork. And anyhow, it'd be a shame if you quit now. We only have one family left. Starting up the car, Shoyuta mutters under his breath while he checks his side mirror. Only the most problematic of the bunch. What was that? Nothing. Shoyuta has spent the better part of the last 12 hours locked in his office trying to iron out the absolute clusterfuck that is the new semester plans, if he even still has a class to teach by the time that rolls around, when his phone goes off. His first instinct is to launch it at the wall, and he probably would if not for the fact it's Nezu's contact. He lets it ring exactly 3 times before resigning himself to whatever awful news the rat is about to throw at him. What is it? He says in lieu of a greeting. Best to get whatever this is out of the way as soon as possible. He immediately regrets this decision. Some pleasantries may have softened the blow for the new job his boss had planned for him. I didn't know UA had a vigilante reform program. We didn't. Not until 7 a.m. this morning. An acquaintance of mine in the HPSC owed me a favor and I was able to pull some strings. However, it's not so much a vigilante reform as it is, well, think of it as probation. Probation? Yes. You see, we let him off with a slap on the wrist previously, but given his record and the fact that this is his 3rd strike, so to speak, I decided to take more active measures. What's so special about this Midoriya kid that you wouldn't just let the court sort him out? Apart from being a former UA applicant, it would be an absolute waste to see such an exceptionally bright and talented young mind locked away. If he's so exceptional, how is he a former applicant? As a professional crime fighter, Shoyuta can smell bullshit and scheming from a mile away, and the rat reeks of both. Why show interest now? Well, do you recall the stain incident? You're shitting me. If only. Detective Tsukachi is standing at the doors of Tokyo Precinct when Shoyuta pulls up. Immediately his eyes are drawn to the short green-haired child at his side who looks like someone told him to take off his shoes and walk across a floor of hot Legos. There are thick-set bracelets on his wrists, too, some heavy-duty Quirk suppressors by the look of them. While Tsukachi walks them down the steps, Shoyuta turns to Nezu. You said he was a vigilante, not a supervillain. Besides, the kid who took down Stain wound up being quirkless. Why do they have him in those? Have him in? Oh, the suppressant braces, yes. Mr. Midoriya was actually only quirkless until recently. The trauma from the collapsing building seems to have awakened a dormant quirk, and quite a strong one at that. Quite intriguing, wouldn't you agree? As part of our arrangement, Midoriya is to wear them outside of your supervision explicitly. So let me get this straight. You decided to take under our custody not just a vigilante, but one with a powerful quirk who has no understanding of how to use it, and then dumped him on me. Correct. I would have handed him off to Vlad, but Midoriya is a little rough around the edges. I think you'd be a much better fit given your quirk and disposition. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm not looking at you like anything, he replies, resisting the urge to throw himself through the window. Just then, the back door opens and in comes the problem child of the hour. Midoriya doesn't say a word, doesn't even look up to make eye contact through the rear view as he shuts the door and buckles in. Detective Tsukachi stoops over in the window next to Nezu and Shoyuta rolls down the window pane. Somehow, Tsukachi looks worse than Shoyuta feels. Thanks for grabbing him. I already got in contact with Mrs. Midoriya over the phone last night, he chuckles, if you could call it that, and rubs at his eyes. She's up to date on the situation. Unhappy obviously, but cooperative. Stopped by the station this morning to talk to him and give him a change of clothes. All you should have to do is stop by his apartment to pick up his things. Nezu smiles. Thank you, detective, your help is tremendously appreciated. Thank you, but I'll feel appreciated when the station finally lets me go home. I've been here for 38 hours. We've all been working hard, Shoyuta says with a nod. I hope you get some rest, detective. Dipping his head, Tsukachi straightens up. You too, Eraser. Midoriya? In the back seat, Shoyuta sees the kid's eyes flick up briefly to look at the detective. Tsukachi sighs. I'm sorry it wound up like this. I hope you do well. Midoriya answers his sentiment with a middle finger. I'm going to let you all go now. Good luck. They pull away from the precinct in silence until Nezu breaks it, twisting around in his seat to peek at their escort through the headrest. Hello. It's wonderful to finally meet you face to face. I'm Principal Nezu, we spoke on the phone. And our driver for today is to be your guardian, Aizawa Shoyuta, codename Eraserhead, the kid interrupts. For the first time since he got in, Midoriya looks up. Shoyuta gets a look of disdainful green eyes in the rear view. Yes? Nezu chirps, unfazed. From the corner of his eye, Shoyuta sees the principal's fur ripple, like an interested predator. He looks at Shoyuta. Have you two met before? Keeping his eyes on the road, Shoyuta frowns. He's pretty sure he'd remember running into a vigilante of the kid's stature before. He's had run-ins with a few vigilantes, even worked with some before, but not Midoriya. No, he says, and his tone makes it very clear that he has nothing further to add. It's a little concerning, and Shoyuta makes a mental note to drill the kid for answers later. For now, he's content to get the rest of this job over with. You're positive there? Isn't any other option for Izuku? Is the first thing Midoriya Inko says when she opens the door to her apartment. Shoyuta doesn't even get a chance to knock on the door. He stands there with his hand poised to rap against it and instead looks down at the female clone of the problem child that's sulking behind him. She's standing at the foot of the door to the apartment complex in house slippers and a wrinkled t-shirt, and knots her fingers together as she looks at him. Thankfully, Nezu pipes up. I'm afraid not, Midoriya-san. Your son put us in quite a unique situation. I'm afraid this is the best we can do given the circumstances. She looks like she's about to argue, and Shoyuta really doesn't have the mental bandwidth for it, so he noses a foot over the threshold of the door and wedges himself inside. Where are his things? He asks, toeing off his shoes. Midoriya Sr. gives him a pinched look before stepping out of the door completely. In his room, down the hall. Second door on the left. He's already moving towards the hall, Midoriya's voice trailing behind him. Come in, please. About the circumstances, the detective at the police station tried to explain everything to me, but I'm afraid I still don't. Shoyuta leaves Nezu to the mercy of the women, finding the right door and stepping inside. For a teenager's room, the place is surprisingly barren. There's a bed, a desk with a few composition books lined on it, and a dresser beneath a single window, but aside from that, it's empty. Some brighter patches on the wall suggest that posters once stuck there, but if ever they did, they're long gone. Sitting on top of the bed are two suitcases, and Shoyuta makes a beeline for them. The sooner he retrieves the kid's things, the sooner he can go to the car to let Nezu deal with his mother. Normally, he wouldn't tactically retreat in the face of his student's parents, but he thinks it's pretty justified given the circumstances. The kid was all but dumped on him thanks to Nezu, so excuse Shoyuta if he doesn't feel bad about leaving the rat to deal with an unhappy mother. His plans are thwarted, however, when he grabs the suitcases and feels a shiver run up his spine. Muscle memory kicks in and he whirls, hair rising from his face as he activates his quirk. It's the kid. He has a split second to think how the hell did he sneak up on me, but it's immediately followed up by right. Vigilante. Shoyuta drops his quirk. You should be with your mother and Nezu. It's my room, the kid says, stepping inside. Excuse me for not wanting to be present while my mom insists that I'm not suited to attend a hero school. Midoriya walks straight to the desk. He grabs the line of composition books there and turns them so they're stacked, then looks over at him. Bring those over here? Shoyuta doesn't budge. Like hell he will, he's not a nanny. When Midoriya realizes that he's not going to comply, he rolls his eyes, walks over and yanks one of the suitcases from his hands. Shoyuta says nothing as the kid zips it open, mutters something under his breath, and starts throwing things onto the floor. Hero merch, specifically. Rolled up posters, blankets, figurines, pins, pens, the whole deal. It's easy to see the kid has his favorites. There's merch from many of his colleagues, sure, but the overwhelming majority is of All Might. The kid's face turns a dark shade of red the more stuff he removes. After a few moments, Midoriya gives up, dumping all the contents onto the floor. A fanboy? Not anymore. Mom hasn't exactly accepted that. An uncomfortable silence falls over them as Midoriya carefully replaces all the hero merch with the composition books, then zips it closed. He gives the second suitcase a look through and when no more merch turns up, closes it and stands up. By now, Shoyuta has migrated to the door, both ears on the conversation out in the living room and both eyes on Midoriya. He's curious about the contents of those notebooks, but not enough to actually prod about them. Besides, he's pretty sure he wouldn't get any kind of satisfying answer from the kid. His plans for escaping to the car have gone out the window, so he'll settle for hiding out in the room until Nezu calls him. It seems that Midoriya has the same idea, because he falls onto the bed. A few tense seconds tick by and he picks absently at his bracelets. Stop that? Midoriya snorts and plants his hands on either side of him. Shoyuta feels his eye twitch. He should say something comforting maybe, but comfort was never his strong suit. Nezu gave him the rundown of the situation the day before, but it's still hard to believe that the small, petulant kid in front of him is the vigilante that's been stirring up trouble in Mizudafu's underground for the past year and some change. That this kid took down Stain. While quirkless. Shoyuta hasn't had any run-ins with him, personally, seeing as downtown isn't his jurisdiction. That doesn't mean Shoyuta hasn't heard of him though. As an underground hero, it's kind of his job to know things. Speaking of, given everything he knows, he really should try not to be so himself. He grimaces at the thought of it. Hey, he can do this. He's been best friends with the living embodiment of sunshine for 15 years. He has plenty of examples to go by. Shoyuta opens his mouth to say something Hisashi approved, but it comes out like this. Not suited for a hero school? Your mother does know you're the one that caught Stain. For a brief moment the constipated look on the kid's face falters, looking genuinely surprised. You know about that? The idiot you saved was my student. We both had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, the look returns again, and bitterness seeps into his tone. She knows I was in Hosu during the attack. You heroes didn't want the public to know what really went down. You think they'd tell my mom? Shoyuta sniffs. They leave shortly after. Shoyuta isn't sure what went down between Midoriya Sr. and Nezu while he and the problem child had the world's most awkward staring contest, but when they leave, she doesn't give them any trouble. There's tears in her eyes and a warble in her voice, and he fears that they'll have to separate her from the kid with a crowbar, but they manage to depart without too much trouble. Midoriya is strangely quiet through all of it, and if Shoyuta didn't know any better he'd say that the kid almost looks relieved when they pull away from the apartment building. There's a distinct air of awkwardness on the rest of the way to UA, and Izuku is content to let his captors stew in it. Call it vigilante reform, or whatever fancy name the principal of UA slapped on it in order to be released into their custody, he's going to call it how it is. He's their captive. Their unwanted guest for the next 3 years, kept close to their chest and monitored for any kind of suspicious activity until they can come up with something better to do with him. It was the only compromise Izuku could find that didn't end with him serving some kind of prison time. He's not happy with it, but it's better than Tartarus. Aizawa drives them through UA's massive gates, and Izuku does his damnedest to squash the little flame of excitement that instinctively leaps to life in his chest at the sight. He may be at UA, but it's not in the way he would have wanted. Izuku tears his eyes away from the window to look at the bracelets adorning his wrists. They're heavy, clunky, uncomfortable, and a permanent accessory for the foreseeable future. He can take them off inside UA, but only under Aizawa's supervision. He's not even allowed to handle the key. Putting their distrust of him aside, apparently All Might never thought to inform anyone on how using his quirk even works, only that the users needed to be pretty in shape to wield it properly. Either way, they don't want it accidentally going off, and they definitely don't want him knowing how to use it. Aizawa pulls them around to the back of what he's pretty sure is the main building, because wow, UA is a lot bigger than it looks from the outside, to what's likely the faculty parking lot. Principal Nezu is the first to hop out, promising to speak with him more once he's settled in. He hopes that conversation is a long way off. Nezu is much more intelligent than Tsukachi or Sir Nighteye, and arranging all of this felt like pulling teeth. And then he's alone with Eraserhead. Looking off into the middle distance, the hero sighs. "All right, Midoriya. Follow me." As if he has a choice. Tightening his grip on the handles of his suitcases, he follows. He's led across campus to a set of buildings that look suspiciously like they've been thrown up overnight. The landscaping isn't polished like the rest of the campus appears to be, like the land was only recently bulldozed and built upon. Shrubbery and decorative trees are still leaning against the side of the building, waiting to be planted, and one, Alliance, is painted above the arched doorway, and he feels dread pool in his stomach. He feels eyes on him and looks down from the sign to find Aizawa looking at him. Unnerved, he hurries up the stairs. "You teach 1A?" he asks as Aizawa gets the door unlocked. Aizawa motions for him to step inside ahead of him, and he does, tugging his suitcases quickly behind him. It's pitch dark inside. Behind him, Aizawa flicks a switch and light floods the room. Predictably, it's big. Inside is a sprawling common area, with several couches and armchairs arranged around a massive TV. A little ways in Izuku can see the island of a counter peak around a corner, and further back still is a stairwell and elevator adjacent. Aizawa clears his throat and Izuku walks further in. "I do." He turns to face Izuku. "Is that going to be an issue?" "Fan-freaking-tastic." He swallows back a bark of manic laughter. Instead, he sticks a plastic gin on his face. "Nope." There's a pause, then Aizawa looks away and gestures half-heartedly into the air. "This entire building belongs to 1A, which while you're certainly not a part of, as my responsibility to watch all of you, it's only logical to keep you under the same roof. Due to recent events, UA has decided to make dorm rooms mandatory for students in its hero program. The rest of the class is arriving tomorrow. Great. That's 1 day for him to mentally prepare for that shitstorm. Consequently, I'll also be moving in to make sure you brats don't level the place." The man sounds incredibly exhausted by that fact. He pauses to level him with a stern glare. "I expect you to behave. I may not be able to expel you, but I have zero tolerance for nonsense. This is the ground level. You and I are on the first floor." He nods to the elevator. "I'm room 1, you're room 2. You have a closet and bathroom to yourself. The entire building has cameras both inside and out, barring your rooms and bathrooms. It locks, but I have an override key. Don't make me use it." Izuku scoffs. "What? You're not even going to attempt to make me feel like I'm not here against my will? You're not stupid, and I'm not here to coddle you. So no." He shrugs. "It's a fair point. And the rules I'm expected to follow? Don't leave the building and don't do anything stupid," the man says, making his way to the stairs. "I'll be notified as soon as you do." He stops in the arch of the stairwell and points to Izuku's wrists. "Unless it's to shower, I'm leaving those bracelets on. It's not up to dispute. Welcome to UA." And then he's alone. It's not until Izuku is showered, eaten, and on the bed in his new room that Izuku has a realization. That was probably the most decent interaction he's ever had with a teacher. Mirai watches Midoriya talk into Tsukachi's phone from the other side of the one-way mirror and wills himself to calm down. A hothead was bad in most situations, this one included, and Midoriya Izuku seems to have a talent in making his blood boil. That's no good. This is his mentor's legacy they're dealing with, and the future of the hero world. Detective Tsukachi is in there, too, listening in on the conversation with quiet resignation. They've spent the better part of the last 4 hours trying to get the upper hand on the brat to no avail, and now they've been forced to call in on that rat in order to get anywhere. He left the room to keep himself from losing composure. Once tonight was enough, and resulted in Midoriya turning the tables on them. He should go back in to make sure that they don't screw this up any more than it already is. Much like the man himself, Yagi-san's friend is far too earnest, too lenient for his own good. He's about to do just that when Midoriya presses something on the phone screen, then slides it across the table where Tsukachi grabs it. Mirai squints when the two exchange words, but it's no good. He can't read lips. He doesn't wonder for long though, because Tsukachi stands up and, with a tip of his hat, leaves the room. Mirai is on him as soon as the door is closed. "What was that? You're done talking with the principal?" The detective looks incredibly put upon, but he pays it no mind. We are. And? Swakuchi pulls his collar up defensively and shoves past him. And nothing. Nezu agreed a neutral third party would be best. He's getting everything arranged, and Midoriya will be out of our hands for the time being. Mirai turns after him. I know you don't like this, but it's our best option for now. Is it though? Personally, I would have been happier if we already had one for all back. Oh wait, we did, but that apparently wasn't enough for you. It shouldn't have been enough for you. I cannot believe that you were going to agree to his ludicrous terms out of hand. And I can't believe. Tsukachi whirls to face him once more and jabs at his chest with a finger. Mirai slaps it away. That to you, agreeing to give an innocent kid immunity is ludicrous as opposed to stuffing him in Tartarus indefinitely. And yet, here we are. He takes a deep breath. Do not blow up again, Mirai, you owe it to Yagi-san. I am willing to admit, he says slowly, adjusting his glasses, that my original plan may have been rash. No, really. However, I had just witnessed my mentor being murdered on live broadcast. As if the rest of us didn't? And my emotions were high. He glares at the detective, and the man only rolls his eyes. But it came from a place of good intentions. Oh, did it? Then by all means, enlighten me on your thought process. All for one should have been dead. You thought he was as much as I did. As much as Yagi-san did. Their fight was brutal. They brought down an entire prefecture, and we had our best quirks on the case to make sure that the fight was thought to be the result of a natural disaster. Your point? All Might caved his skull in. Your department ID'd the corpse. You and I both watched them burn the body. But he didn't die. By all accounts, by all logic, all for one should be the one gone right now, not Yagi-san. If he could pull that off, can you really look me in the eyes and tell me that there's no possibility that Midoriya is a plant? That sometime between his arrest following the stain incident, the League of Villains didn't get their hands on him? For all we know, this is all part of his plan. We would all be safer with Midoriya in custody until we can know for sure that he's telling us the truth. And don't try to tell me we know that for certain. He knows how your quirk works. We can't know for sure that he hasn't also figured out a way to work around it. Yes, but the likelihood of that is incredibly slim. Maybe, but you aren't looking at the big picture here. Let me put it this way, best case scenario, I made an error and one person suffers for it. Worst case scenario, we hand over immunity to a member of the League of Villains with a head full of state secrets along with the identity of the next one for all user, and we all suffer for it. If you could even call it that, suffering is too light of a word. Granting him immunity is too risky. Barring Tartarus, UA is the best place we can put him under surveillance without running the risk of a security breach. If he is as innocent as you think he is, then we have one for all set aside in one of the most secure locations in the country, as well as a vigilante taken off of the streets. However, should mind paranoia prove warranted, then we have the upper hand on the League. Tsukachi looks pained, and he runs a hand through his hair. Why are we having this conversation, Sasaki? What's done is done. And I understand that. He takes a breath. I wanted to explain myself. We're going to be working together until we get this mess sorted out, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from. Earlier I was being emotional, and I have only made things harder for us. I do not intend on doing so again. Plant or not, Midoriya Izuku now holds the last vestiges of Yagi-san. I don't want to see it rotting in prison, but I also don't want it under control of that child. So from here on out, I hope we can work together to find a long-term solution. Detective Tsukachi stares at him for a long time before shaking his head and turning back around to leave the room. Sure. Whatever you say. He's left with the ringing of the door as it slams. How was your first night at UA? Izuku stares at the principal perched on the edge of the wide desk in front of him. Nezu waits patiently for him to respond, taking a sip from the comically large teacup in his paws. He doesn't want to admit that it was fine, all things considered, or that the bed they provided was probably the most comfortable he's ever slept in. Instead, he chooses to ignore the question completely. What do you want? Nezu pauses mid-sip, then sets his cup down beside him. The principal grins, revealing a neat little row of sharp teeth. Izuku wills himself not to flinch. Skipping the pleasantries I see. Nothing concerning, I assure you. Your signature is needed to certify your new quirk status. With that, Principal Nezu reaches behind him and retrieves a sheet of paper. He holds it out for Izuku, who snatches it quickly. The paper is thick, almost like cardboard, with a picture of him taken from his online school's photo ID. Next to it is his name and current address, and where his quirk status would usually say not applicable, it instead reads something else. The line for his signature is printed at the bottom. He squints. You couldn't think of a better name than Superpower? Picking up his teacup, Nezu shrugs. We couldn't very well name it One for All. If you would like to change it later on, that's more than doable. He grunts an affirmation and holds out a hand. Pen. Nezu obliges, and he quickly signs the line. Handing the form back, Izuku stands up from his chair. Can I go now? One last thing. The next thing Nezu pulls from his desk is a plastic card. He tosses it over and Izuku snatches it from the air on reflex. Turning it over in his hands, Izuku realizes that it's an ID. His ID. It's red, white, and blue, the school's colors, with Ward of UA written across the top. In the center is an updated photo of him, one he recognizes from the precinct a few days ago. He snorts. He looks terrible, fresh out of the interrogation room after spending an hour playing verbal tug-of-war with the detective and Sir Nighteye and 3 hours on the phone talking with Nezu. It's cropped awkwardly, just before his chin, definitely to hide the rude gesture he made as it was taken. Izuku pockets it and looks expectantly at the principal. That will be all, Midoriya. Do you need assistance finding your way back to the dorms? I can call for Aizawa. I got it, thanks, he says, waving a hand over his shoulder as he walks to the door. He has no desire to see his new guardian, and he doubts Aizawa wants to see him either. He practically sprinted away once they arrived outside the principal's office, probably preoccupied with the task of moving in 20-odd, freshly traumatized high schoolers. God's classmates. I really didn't miss those. Being schooled online has spoiled him. He never expected to have to deal with bigoted classmates again, and now he's forcibly attending the premiere for big-shot hero students. With Bakugo. Even if they're not classmates, technically. He wasn't alone with Nezu for too long, so maybe if he hurries, he'll make it back to Heights Alliance before anyone gets there. You're being ridiculous, he mutters to himself. For days ago you were a vigilante, you can handle a few teens. He can do this. This isn't Aldra, and he's not quirkless. They have no reason to be hostile. Bakugo doesn't need a reason, a traitorous voice whispers. He picks up the pace. Any normal school year, Shoyuta would have given his left kidney to have a subdued class of first years. They're always loud and always obnoxious, quick to use their quirks and slow to use their brains. This year, he was lucky enough to have a class full of potential, but that seems to be where his luck ended. Now, he almost wants his students to be their usual annoying selves. But this is no regular school year, these are unprecedented circumstances, and the symbol of peace is no more. A few of the chatterboxes, Kaminari, Ashido, try to keep up the class spirits and obsess over the size of the Heights Alliance, but the overall mood of the class is abysmal. He goes over the rules, threatening them accordingly, and when his spiel runs dry he braces himself to deliver the last bit of news. Before I dismiss you, Shoyuta says, feeling pointed exhaustion weighing on him, I have 2 more things to announce. 1, I will be carrying out your lessons in heroics from now on. In the back of the pack Kirishima wipes at his eyes quickly, and Bakugo stares blankly at the ground. If he's being honest, it's Bakugo that he's most reluctant to have back in class. If it were up to him, the kid would be going to mandatory therapy and pulled from the hero course until he's cleared by Hound Dog, but the kid's parents were determined to have him back. He's been eerily quiet since he arrived with the rest of 1A 30 minutes ago. The part of him that's a teacher hopes that maybe Midoriya will be good for him. The kid was captured trying to go in to save him, after all, but the part of him that's an experienced pro knows not to put much stock into hope. And 2, we have someone joining us. He's not a classmate, let me make that clear. UA has recently adopted a vigilante reform program, and Nezu has put it upon me to be his guardian for his stay here. Your parents have been informed and agreed to send you back to UA with that in mind. On cue, a ripple of conversation runs through the class. Some of the spark from pre-Camino breaks through, their voices running over each other. Even Bakugo and Todoroki look vaguely interested. Is that safe? It has to be, otherwise our parents wouldn't have agreed to it, Karo. We have a reform program? What mad times have befallen us? Who is it, sensei? Ida, in typical form, raises his hand, his voice loud and clear over the rest of them. Shoyuda meets the kid's eyes and raises a brow. To his credit, Ida keeps calm. Out of everyone here, he almost certainly knows the who in question. Yeah, I didn't even know there were vigilantes our age, Ciro says. If it weren't safe, Nezu wouldn't have placed him in our care, he says, answering the first question. He is required to wear Quirk suppressants for the duration of his stay here. Though he used to be a vigilante, I will have zero tolerance for harassment and childish behavior. You don't have to like him. You don't have to even interact with him. But try anything stupid and you'll be expelled. Do I make myself clear? A murmur of adequately nervous affirmatives follow. Good. As for who he is, none of you would have heard of him, since as far as I know, he didn't have a name people called him by. Unlike most vigilantes, he had the sense not to draw unwanted attention to himself. Until recently, obviously. He notices a floating uniform wave its sleeve enthusiastically. Hagakure. Yes? Behind them, he sees a blurry figure approach the front door. Perfect timing. So what did he do to get caught? He huffs. Ask him yourself. The door opens, and all 18 of his students in his class whip around at once. He opens the door, chest heaving from his brisk flight back to the dorms, and comes face to face with around 20 wide-eyed stares. Like a magnet, his eyes are drawn immediately to Bakugo's. Bullshit. For a solid chunk of time, everything seems to stop. In his periphery, he sees Aizawa slip away up the stairs, and he has a split second to think, you hobo bastard, before the moment abruptly ends. What the fuck are you doing here? Bakugo snarls, his voice cracking. Izuku can't help it, he flinches on instinct, he doesn't fully process it, but the rest of 1A looks shocked that he's spoken at all. Izuku sucks in a quick breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Hello, he says, choosing to ignore him. I'm Midoriya. I don't want to be here any more than you probably want me to. I'll keep to myself if you keep to yours. He stops, then adds as an afterthought, thanks for having me. It's then that he notices a second familiar face. Aizawa's idiot students he saved back in Hosu. What was his name? Something? He vaguely remembers the kid wearing some kind of ingenium getup. Oh God, does he recognize him? He did lose his surgical mask during the fight, but he had charcoal in his hair and that alley was really dark at the time. But judging by the starstruck expression on his face, he almost certainly does. He really hopes he doesn't say anything. That would be weird. And probably illegal. And Izuku really doesn't want to give Sir Nighteye any more fuel to the raging dumpster fire that is his current situation. Not wanting to be gawked at any longer, he dips his head and makes a beeline for the stairs. Maybe if he moves fast enough, he can use their stunned silence to avoid. He smells Bakugo's quirk before he sees it. Izuku twists his body away from the oncoming assault before he can even touch him. The smell of sickly sweet caramel fills the air and it makes his stomach churn. Oddly enough, it isn't followed by an explosion. He spins to face Bakugo, because like hell does he want his back to him, legs tensed and ready to flee at a moment's notice. Bakugo looks more shocked than angry that he doesn't currently have Izuku's shirt bunched in his fist, and smoke curls form his palms. There's an outcry as the rest of 1A reacts, but it's a red-haired kid and the ingenium guy that run up to restrain him. Dude, what are you doing? Did you not hear Aizawa like the rest of us? Exactly. It doesn't matter if he was once a vigilante, he is a guest here. You would do best to get a hold of yourself. Stuff its shitty hair, 4 eyes, Bakugo spits, ripping himself free from them. They relent, but hover nervously close in case he were to attack again. It's unnecessary. Bakugo is angry, furious, even, but something is clearly wrong with him. He's trembling, and when he speaks there's a tremor to his voice that Izuku's never heard before. And it's wrong, because Bakugo Katsuki doesn't shake. Bakugo Katsuki doesn't ever look like he's on the verge of tears. And yet here he is, And Izuku knows that his ex-childhood friend couldn't touch him if he tried. Don't fucking ignore me, Deku. How the fuck are you a vigilante? Why are you in Quirk suppressants? Is this some kind of fucking joke? Around them, the class and the two who ran up are saying a lot of things, really, and maybe they're trying to talk Bakugo down, or maybe they're apologizing for his behavior, or maybe they're asking the same questions, but Izuku doesn't hear anything they say at all. He looks into his old tormentor's wild eyes, watches the way his chest heaves unhealthily, sees his teeth bared in spit-soaked snarl, and everything else turns to static. Izuku's mouth moves of its own accord, twisted in a sharp smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He bares his own teeth, and it's Bakugo who flinches. Fuck off. This time when he heads up the stairs, nobody tries to stop him. He makes it to his door before he hears it, Bakugo thundering furiously up the stairs. Well, Bakugo and someone else, if the pursuing footsteps and protests are anything to go by. Izuku gets the door to his room halfway closed when there's a soft click of the door next to his opening, and the commotion behind him comes to an abrupt stop. He pauses, peeking out just enough to glare out into the hallway. On the first floor landing is Bakugo, the two from before, and a handful of other students he didn't really stop to look at before, the latter looking like a bunch of deer in headlights and the former grinding his teeth angrily. Izuku's eyes flick to follow their line of sight and is surprised to see none other than Aizawa standing in his doorway, arms folded and glaring something foul. What did I just get finished saying? The man asks, his monotone making his students flinch. Well, save for Bakugo, who just clicks his tongue. Sensei, we were just, the kid with the red hair starts. Blatantly ignoring what I warned you against? With the threat of expulsion? That one elicits a cringe from Bakugo, and isn't that nice? I don't care what you were just. Unless it was to check out your rooms or ask me a question, I don't want to hear it. Yes, Sensei, they all say, at varying levels of fear. Even Bakugo, whose eyes flick to his before looking to the ground. To his mortification, Aizawa catches this. The mob of students retreat, tails tucked between their legs, and Izuku ducks entirely behind his door in the hopes of writing off the past 5 minutes as a decent success and, Midoriya, cursing under his breath, he opens the door to reveal Aizawa looking at him with an inscrutable expression. What? You have a history with Bakugo? Izuku feels his eye twitch. I don't care for it and I don't particularly want to be enlightened. I just need to know that it's not going to cause a problem. It takes everything in him not to scoff. Instead, he grips the door in one hand and levels Aizawa with a stare. If anyone is going to cause a problem, it's him. He slams the door closed, and when the sound of footsteps retreating to the other room comes muffled through the wall, followed by the shut of a door, Izuku breaks. Shaking, he slides down the door and hits the floor heavily, his heart beating staccato in his chest. Damn it, he bites, pressing the heels of his hands to his eyes where tears threaten to burst. The cool metal of the cuffs press into his cheeks. I won't let you get to me. I won't. Sucking in deep gulps of air, he pulls his hands away and grimaces at the way they shake. Shit. Apparently no amount of vigilante work or grandstanding can stop his body from reacting the way a decade of bullying has trained it to. He's just grateful he was able to keep it together for as long as he did. It helped that Bakugo was clearly off as well, but that doesn't stop frustration at himself from bubbling up his throat. Izuku rises unsteadily to his feet, a hand braced on the door behind him, and looks around the room. It's bare aside from the desk, the dresser, and his bed. What little clothes his mom packed him are already stashed away, and without his old fanboy merch, the only thing to indicate that it's even occupied is the row of composition notebooks lining the desk along with his phone. Technically, there's nothing stopping him from wandering around Heights Alliance, but the downstairs full of curious, starstruck, or hostile hero students has him reluctant to leave the room. He'll leave the room later, to stretch his legs or sneak food when the rest of 1A is asleep, but for now he'll just have to bide his time. He falls in the desk chair and reaches for his phone. There's a dozen or so texts from his mom, cringing, he turns off the screen and tosses it behind him. Instead, he reaches for a random volume of hero analysis for the future and cracks it open. If he can't exercise his limbs, he might as well exercise his mind. Somewhere in Tokyo, In the gutted-out shell of a condemned apartment building, Tamura watches with increasing ire as half of his remaining team bicker about who has dibs on the couch compress somehow got his hands on that night. It's hideous, covered in faded green cloth with holes and exposed springs, and it's almost definitely infested with something. Still, Twice and Toga fight over it like it's the last cookie in the cookie jar while Dabi looks on disdainfully. Magna and Compress gave up trying to reason with either of them a while ago, and have retreated to the small section of the living room they've lined with makeshift sleeping pallets. Apparently he also got his hands on a handheld radio on his outing, because they have it set on the floor between them. It was interesting listening to the masses cry over their beloved idol for the first hour, but almost a full day later and he was ready to dust the damn thing along with the couch. Tired of listening to them, he goes to reach for his handheld in his hoodie and scowls when his hand meets nothing. It's not there, of course it isn't. He left it on the bar right before All Might and his stooges broke in and ruined everything. Tamura curses under his breath and rises from the ground to stomp over to the balcony door. He gets halfway there before Dabi's raspy voice calls after him. "Where are you going, Dusty?" "To get some peace and quiet before I kill them," he says, cutting the duo in danger a look. They don't even pause. If anything, they get louder. Toga is waving a knife around, and Twice spews a string of curse words while raising his hands defensively, and Tamura rolls his eyes before wrenching the door open. It smells like garbage outside. Hot garbage, thanks to the heat of the summer. The smell wafts up from the narrow street below, and he has a lovely view of the brick siding of the building adjacent. Whatever, it's better than watching the shit show inside and ignoring the doubtful eyes of his subordinates looking for instruction. He's not stupid. He knows they're questioning him, their loyalty to the League of Villains. All Might is dead, but Sensei is gone, along with all their funding. Having the #1 nuisance out of the way was great and all, but Tamura knows that without support, his team is likely to break apart. The big boss is cleared, but the game is hardly over. They need money to level up so they can progress to the next level, start the next mission. And they have that, he knows it, they're just waiting on that useless doctor. He leans one arm against the rusty railing of the balcony and scratches at his neck idly. Where the fuck is Kurogiri? Almost on cue, the sharp taste of ozone saturates the air, and he feels his ears pop. The space beside him warps, and then Kurogiri's purple mist makes an appearance. Ghostly yellow eyes look down at him as his form solidifies, and Kurogiri steps into existence. "Shigaraki Tamura," he says, bowing, "I'm back from my rendezvous with Dr. Garaki. I apologize for the delay." "It's been 2 days, Kurogiri. That's a bit longer than a delay. The doctor is willing to hold an audience with you, but I am afraid that such a meeting comes with a catch." "A catch?" Anger flashes through his body and he bears down on the railing with all 5 fingers. It wasn't much to begin with, but now it disintegrates fully. Swearing, he steps away from the edge. "What fucking catch? I'm Sensei's successor, he's supposed to listen to me now. Dr. Garaki's loyalty has always been to All for One, Shigaraki. Tamura, and All for One is not dead yet. If you want his support, you must first prove to him that you are capable of succeeding on your own." Tamura's scratching ramps up, skin flaking beneath the onslaught. "How does he expect me to succeed without any funds? I can't feed a team on expectations." I argued similarly. His warp gate says, eyes squinting. I believe his wording was, if Sensei saw something worthwhile in him, he'll figure something out. Ugh. He lashes out at the wall this time, but his touch is expertly diverted by a warp gate. His hand pops out in front of a dumpster down below, decaying it to dust in a handful of seconds. The door slides open, revealing an unamused Dabi. He dips his head in Kurogiri's direction before locking onto Tamura. "See, our messenger is back. Any news? We getting out of this shithole anytime soon?" Clicking his tongue, Tamura yanks back his hand. He's going to yell at him to get back inside, when he hears some news anchor's voice from inside. "An endeavor fill the hole that All Might has left in his wake? Now more than ever, the country needs a stable pillar in these tumultuous times." Tamura pauses, cocks his head to the side as a toothy grin splits his face. Ignoring Dabi completely, he looks to Kurogiri. "He wants proof I'm competent? I'll show that bastard competent. The sun has long dipped past the horizon when Izuku deems it safe to go outside his room. He's pretty sure he heard his unwanted roommates bustle to their rooms about an hour ago and there hasn't been any noise since, so he should be good to sneak down to the kitchen to grab food. Was it good to skip eating all day? Realistically, is he going to be able to avoid the whole of 1A for the duration of his stay here? Also no, but he's going to keep it up for as long as possible. Especially after the shit show that was this morning. He peeks out of his door before emerging completely. It's dark in the building, something about the lights being on a timer. Izuku leads the way with light of his phone, stepping lightly and with his eyes glued to the door to Eraserhead's room as he makes his way to the stairs. He makes it downstairs, takes a step past the couch. Midoriya. His body moves on instinct, fist lashing out and catching someone squarely in the chest. The hit lands with a hollow thud. The stranger grunts painfully and falls flat on their back. Izuku quickly shines his phone down and doesn't stifle his groan. It's the Hosugai. I'd say my bad, but you really should have seen that coming. Hosugai grunts and props himself up on the heels of his hands, wincing. I suppose I should have. It was unwise of me to ambush you like that, I apologize. He sounds like he means it, and Izuku feels guilty enough to reach out hand. He immediately regrets it, because the guy's face lights up like a torch. He takes his offered hand and heaves himself up. Then he straightens his glasses and bows sharply at the waist, so abruptly that Izuku fears he might fall over again. Again, I apologize. He tries to whisper, but it sounds awfully loud in the space of the empty common room. I wanted to speak with you, and I figured you would wait for the others to retire before coming down, so I waited. Not weird at all. Okay? Izuku shifts anxiously. He has a feeling he knows what he wants to talk about, and he'd really rather not, thank you very much. However, he gets the feeling that he won't leave him alone until he gets whatever it is off of his chest. Sighing in defeat, Izuku looks past him towards the stairs. But could you be a little quiet about it? Not wanting to deal with your class still stands. Of course, he straightens up, face serious. Firstly, I wish to introduce myself. My name is Ida Tenya, hero name yet to be determined. Secondly, he bows again, I wanted to thank you. I don't know if you remember me, but you saved my life and avenged my brother back during the Hosa disaster. I wasn't able to before. Ida, right, he says, shuffling closer to the stairs. Maybe while he's bowing he can make a swift escape. No food tonight but he'll live. I remember you. It's no big deal, I did whatever anyone else would have done. But it is a big deal. Ida jolts upright, and Izuku cringes at the volume. Ida slaps a hand over his mouth, then lowers it and whispers with intensity, it is. I would have died. Native would have died too, because I was too angry to be the hero he needed. But you saved us. You were that hero, more than that, the only hero who could manage to defeat that villain. Izuku has one foot on the landing and one hand on the rail, but Ida's words stop him in his tracks. Something heavy rolls in his chest, thickens in his throat. The cuffs on his wrists feel like barbells. Thanks, he says, the words sticking in his throat. He huffs a laugh to clear it. You're probably the only one who thinks that. But you are. I must insist. The news called you a vigilante at best, and a villain at worst, but no villain would have acted so selflessly. And against the hero killer no less. Is this going anywhere? Izuku says, gripping the railing. The strange feelings are only growing heavier, growing thicker, and he can feel heat prickling behind his eyes. He'd really rather not do this right now, rather not, finally, be called a hero while there's shackles on his wrists. No, I suppose it wasn't. I just felt the need to. He takes a step. Then I'm going to sleep. Midoriya, wait. Exhausted, Izuku looks over his shoulder. What? You're not going to eat? No, he says, just in time for his stomach to make a strangled noise. He feels heat rush to his face and he turns away. Good night? Izuku bolts up the stairs before Ida can get another word out. Izuku makes it to his room without further incident, curls up in his bed, and wrestles back the confusing emotions swimming in his chest. He falls asleep like that. Morning comes and he feels even more like shit. A shower helps, but the water pinging off the quirk suppressant sounds like defeat. He dries off, dresses in his starchy UA uniform, and spends the next 30 minutes staring at the newest wave of messages from his mom. Outside his door he can hear the rest of the building waking up, the chatter of hero students and their parade down the hall. Then there's a sharp knock at his door, and Eraserhead's gruff voice ordering him to open up. Aizawa's holding a plastic plate of something. It smells delicious, and Izuku pointedly ignores the sound his stomach makes when it hits his nose. "Your tie looks awful," the hero says, then shoves the plate in his hands. "Ida saved a plate for you. Next time make it to breakfast with everyone else, or you won't eat at all. There's no food allowed in class, so finish it on the way. Follow me." Izuku doesn't need to be told twice. He has half the food down his gullet before they even step out of the elevator, and he tosses the paper plate in a trash can they pass on the way to 1A. Making a mental note to thank Ida when he can, because Izuku will give credit where credit's due, he walks dutifully after the hero. He feels marginally less terrible by the time they make it to 1A's homeroom, but he stops just in front of the threshold when Eraserhead steps through. The door to 1A is huge, like everything else at this school, and the sounds of the class within can be heard from the hallway. Rubbing absently at his cuffs, he feels anxiety creep up on him, sharp as the night in Camino. He sleeps and bounds better than Tartarus, but the thought of facing Bakugo after yesterday makes him nauseous. Will he cause another scene? Probably not in front of Eraserhead. The teachers actually seem to be a deterrent here, but he'd bet money the jerk would find a way. There are 3 things guaranteed in this world: death, taxes, and Bakugo finding a way to be an asshole. He stands there until he catches Aizawa giving him the stink eye, and he thinks fuck it before stepping inside. The reaction is instant. An awkward silence falls over the classroom. 18 pairs of eyes lock onto him, and Izuku realizes with mounting despair that the only 2 free desks are behind Bakugo. Bakugo seems to notice this at the same time, and he bares his teeth in a grimace, but otherwise doesn't say anything. "Class is starting," Aizawa says. "Pick a seat." Doing his best to ignore the eyes on him, Izuku hurries to the back. He takes the furthest seat back from Bakugo, in front of a girl with a black ponytail. He gets situated just in time for the tardy bell to ring, and Aizawa takes attendance. Izuku tunes it out, realizing for the first time that he doesn't have any supplies, no backpack, no textbooks, not even a pen or paper. What exactly do they expect me to do? Am I just supposed to sit here for the next 3 years? Did Eraserhead just forget to give me school supplies? I know they'd rather have me in jail, but if they're gonna put me under UA house arrest, I might as well get to continue my education. Shut the fuck up, Deku, Bakugo hisses under his breath. Fear flares up in his chest, a reflex from a decade of harassment, but it's replaced quickly by annoyance. "I'm sorry, am I bothering you, Bakugo?" he whispers back. In front of him, Bakugo twitches and turns to look over his shoulder. "You fucking. Is there a problem, you two?" Bakugo whips around. Eraserhead is leaning against the podium, glaring heavily at them over his perch, and Izuku is suddenly made very aware of the tension in the room. It's awfully silent, with all of them seeming to hold their breath. Izuku opens his mouth to say no, but of course Bakugo opens his mouth. "Actually," he answers, and Izuku feels his soul leaving his body. Bakugo shoves up from his desk. "Yeah, there is. This fucker has been quirkless his whole goddamned life. What bullshit did he spew to convince you he's a vigilante?" Izuku goes rigid. Even worse than before, he feels a tension settle over him in an unwanted shroud. He's pretty sure he hears voices whispering around him, pretty sure Aizawa is saying something back to Bakugo, but it mostly goes to static. His limbs move on their own. One moment he's sitting, the next he's up, chair falling to the ground with a clatter at his side. "You're insufferable, you know that?" The words fly from his mouth before he can stop them. Blessed with the perfect quirk for a hero, admired by anyone and everyone, and all this time you still feel the need to put me down. It's embarrassing. Would you mind your own business for once, just once, in your life? He looks at Eraserhead. There is a problem. If I have to sit near him for the rest of the year, he's not going to stop harassing me. Can I swap seats with someone, please? His heart pounds in his chest, louder than anything. Bakugo, for once, is shocked silent, crimson eyes as wide as bowls. For a moment, he thinks that Aizawa is going to tell him to sit down, or worse, send him to Nezu. But the hero surprises him, sighing and rubbing at his eyes. Fine. Sadu. A huge kid with short, spiky hair startled in his seat. Weiss-sensei? Swap seats with Midoriya. And Bakugo, Quirkist remarks will not be tolerated on this campus. Need I ask you to leave? Bakugo goes red, and his palms crackle dangerously with his explosions, but Aizawa doesn't look fazed. Actually, his eyes go red with his quirk and his hair starts to float, and Bakugo's explosions are quickly extinguished. I see. I shouldn't have asked. Straight to the principal's office, now. You know quirk usage is prohibited outside of training. Izuku watches, bewildered, and Bakugo looks just as lost. He sputters a protest, but it dies on his tongue when Aizawa's stern expression doesn't waver. Seething, he looks from Aizawa to Midoriya, then once at his classmates, before violently shoving his things in his bag and tearing out of the room. Izuku just watches, mystified, until someone clears their throat behind him. It's the big student, Sadu, apparently, and Izuku scrambles to move out of the way to change seats. His new spot is only 4 desks away from where he was before, but the space already has him feeling less strangled. He sits down shakily, shocked by how well that went, and breathes a sigh of relief when homeroom picks back up. That interaction is definitely going to come back to bite him in the ass later, but at the very least he knows that Eraserhead isn't a complete jerk. The relief is short-lived, however, when he remembers that the entirety of 1A just witnessed that and now thinks he's either quirkless or a liar. It's only made worse when he feels another set of eyes on him, closer now, and looks to his left to see the son of the now #1 hero, Todoroki Shudo. Todoroki Shudo. Izuku doesn't know much about him, except for what he saw at this year's sports festival. And what he saw was impressive. Todoroki has incredibly fine control over the ice he produces, and uses it to devastating effect. Despite his bitterness towards UA, it was a given that he'd watched the festival, he had for years, and being spiteful didn't stop quirks from being interesting. He has a whole 2 pages dedicated to Todoroki in one of his notebooks, full of speculations and weaknesses and ways he could apply his quirk for rescue and combat, as well as a full half-page rant about why it's stupid he doesn't appear to use the left half of his quirk. He has his suspicions for Todoroki's aversion to it, given the fact that his father has historically been known for being a dick, and the gnarly burn scar on Todoroki's face. It wouldn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together, but that doesn't stop Todoroki's stubbornness from being incredibly dumb. Still, just half of the guy's quirk is stronger than most pro-heroes, so Izuku doesn't have that much room to judge. He's shown he has a mind for critical thinking, versatile quirk use, killer instincts, and has been personally trained by Endeavor. And he's looking right at him. Obviously, unabashedly, and inscrutably at Izuku. Why, finally, were so many people interested in him? A year ago he would have been ecstatic to be noticed by anyone, but now more than ever he just wants to be the plain, readily ignored quirkless kid that he's always been dismissed as. Todoroki stares at him, and Izuku keeps his look squarely forward, tuning in to whatever Eraserhead is saying to the rest of the class. Despite the events of the last 2 weeks, UA does not see fit for you all to slow down in your training. In fact, we'll be accelerating it. The rest of your break will be used to prepare for your provisional license exam. Should you all pass, you'll be going into internships at the start of 2nd term. For the next week, we will be working on super moves in Gym Gamma. Super moves? For the provisional license exam? Already? Those usually were pushed back until 2nd year. UA must be more desperate to pump out heroes, now that All Might is gone. Nervous, excited chatter bubbles up around the class. With it, the attention on Izuku slowly pulls away and it feels like he can breathe again. Well, most of it. Izuku can still feel Todoroki's eyes on him even as Aizawa directs them out of the class. Anxious, he waits until the class files out in front of him to rise from his desk and follow them out. He walks at the back of the cluster of excited students and tries to look away from the distinctive head of red and white hair just in front of him. Eraserhead tells Izuku to stay at his side while the rest of 1A funnels into the changing rooms. That's more than okay with him, he was planning on doing so anyways. Izuku picks quietly at his cuffs while Aizawa stands with his nose buried in his scarf, mind running a mile a minute. He might dislike them, but he can't deny that getting to see so many quirks in action will be interesting. He'll definitely have to bring a notebook with him tomorrow, but for now he'll just observe as much as he can so he can jot it all down later. Next to him, Aizawa heaves a massive sigh. I said that I didn't want to know, and I still don't, he starts, and Izuku goes still, but now, it would be illogical to move forward without a better grasp on the situation at hand. What is your relationship with Bakugo? Izuku trains himself not to cringe. Keeping a level voice, he turns and looks up at the hero. We grew up together. Aizawa sniffs. Clearly. I knew that already, problem child. I thought you'd be on at least decent terms, considering you're in this situation because of him. This time, Izuku can't help but flinch as if slapped. In fact, I'd hoped that an old friend might pull him out of his funk. And it has, but obviously not by any productive means. So try again. Embarrassment and frustration, hot and choking, boils up inside him. Izuku flexes his fingers and turns his face to the ground. His words come out quiet and harsh. I thought you were supposed to be good at deduction. What do you think our relationship is? I'm a quirkless freak, and he's the next All Might. We were friends once. Now he hates me. I couldn't tell you why. Aizawa hums. You tried to rescue him, though? That's what heroes do. You're not a hero. Izuku jerks his head up. Tell that to the people I've saved. Several seconds tick by, Izuku matching the hero's unwavering stare. You've done good, I won't deny you that, but you're still not a hero. With a tilt of his head he points towards the changing rooms, and neither are they. Not yet. You're still children, and good intentions or not, you had no business being there. Though let me make one thing blatantly clear, all that has nothing to do with your past quirklessness. He'd been gearing up for a scathing response, but it all goes poof when Aizawa says that. He's horrified to feel a stinging at the corners of his eyes. Thankfully, Aizawa either doesn't point it out or doesn't notice, it's almost certainly the former. You messed up, majorly. You couldn't rescue Bakugo. You couldn't rescue yourself. All Might did, and even he was barely enough. That's why you're here. Because you're not a hero, you're a kid playing at being one. Everyone in this program is. You need training and direction before you can be anything else. That's not fair, he croaks, hating the tremble in his words. You say it has nothing to do with my quirk status, but I tried to get training. I applied, and your school rejected me for that very reason. Aizawa looks unimpressed. Life isn't fair, kid. Of course you got rejected from the hero program. Good hero candidates slip through the cracks all the time because of this school's illogical quirk requirements. That doesn't give you an excuse to take matters into your own hands. This may be a bogus reform program, but if you leave here learning anything, it needs to be that. At any rate, I get why you and Bakugo can't get along. He was quirkish towards you. A caustic laugh rips from his throat. Bakugo was a lot more than quirkish towards him, but whatever. He's more stuck on what Eraser had said. Sure, life isn't fair. He knows that. More than anyone else, he knows that. Aizawa may have a point, but he doesn't get to stand there and tell Izuku that his circumstances are a product of poor luck. He's been ignored, spat on, pitted or handled with gloves by everyone he's ever known because of his quirklessness. It's not a matter of illogical quirk requirements, it's a matter of social prejudice. In the eyes of Yue, Izuku never had a leg in the race to begin with. And he wants to point that out, but he knows it'll fall on deaf ears. Aizawa doesn't care what he thinks, not really. He's made that abundantly clear. Whatever this conversation is, it's not one he's having out of the goodness of his heart. It's out of obligation for his job as a teacher. It's frustrating, but it's also a decency that Izuku has yet to be afforded, and so instead of blowing up, he grits his teeth and keeps his temper in check. Yeah, sure. Aizawa scratches at his stubble. That kind of attitude is disgraceful for anyone to have, even more so for a hero in training. It won't be a problem any longer. I should have addressed his aggression sooner, but I didn't know the scope of the issue. I'll speak with him separately, but let me know if this continues to be an issue. And then Aizawa shifts his attention to the students now trickling out from the changing rooms in their gym uniforms and walks away like nothing happened. He's always been fascinated with quirks, his current predicament hasn't changed that at all, and 1A is chock full of some really interesting ones. Aizawa banished him to the far side of the wall, but the gym gamma is so large that Izuku can watch all of the hero students without needing to get close. And they really are incredible. Even the ones that didn't make it far into the sports festival have interesting quirks. Itching for his notebook and pencils, Izuku watches a girl with a frog mutation deftly bob and weave around an onslaught of attacks from ectoplasm clones. A little ways away, a boy with an abdominal laser tests out an interesting piece of support gear. He sees some familiar quirks as well, the kid with a bird head and his sentient shadow, Ida's engines and the guy with the red hair that stopped Bakugo before. Speak of the devil. More explosions ring out in the gym as Bakugo lets loose a volley of explosions. They obliterate a chunk of the pillar he's practicing on, and Izuku watches with reluctant interest as it crashes to the ground. Luckily, there's no one around the area of impact. There's a short lull as the rest of 1A throw him uneasy glances, but a harsh bark from their teacher to get back to work gets them moving again. Sneering, Bakugo pops off firecrackers in his palms and releases an explosion loud enough to make him wince. He doesn't, however, yell, not even his signature die. Aside from the blast of his quirk, Bakugo has been weirdly quiet since trudging into Gym Gamma 30 minutes ago. Aizawa had stopped him as he'd walked inside, dragging him over to the entrance with a stern face and undoubtedly harsh words until waving him off with an unimpressed stare. Bakugo had locked eyes with Izuku as he walked away, face burning an angry red, but he hadn't said so much as a word since. Hopefully that's a good thing. He scoffs. Yeah, and maybe Sir Nighteye will let me go. Training ends a couple hours later. Aizawa dismisses them for the day and slowly 1A filters out of Gym Gamma, moaning and groaning about overused quirks. Izuku discreet falls into step once more at the back of the pack. He makes it exactly 2 steps away from the group when there's a voice just behind him. And where do you think you're going? The dorms, he says, looking behind him. Aizawa squints. You'll go to the cafe to eat with the rest of 1A. Other faculty members are stationed there, so I can get some time to myself. Fine. If the cafe is anything like the rest of this school, it'll be ridiculously big and he can find a table far enough away from the rest of them. It's when he stalks off that he notices a dozen curious faces looking on at the interaction. They quickly look away, all except Todoroki, who blinks owlishly at him before ambling on. He sighs. It's been exactly 1 day, and he's already exhausted. Thankfully, the cafeteria is just as large as he anticipated. Izuku collects his food quickly, curry rice and miso, and shuffles off to a lonely table to marvel at Lunch Rush's mysterious quirk. His isolation is ruined when a tray clacks down on the table in front of him. Looking up, his nerves kick into high gear when he catches the mismatched gaze of Todoroki. He pauses with his spoon half raised to his lips. Todoroki says nothing, doesn't bat an eye, he simply plops down into the seat across from him and quietly digs into his food. Slowly, Izuku sets his spoon back in his bowl, waiting for the other shoe to drop. When nothing happens, he looks around for the rest of 1A to see if this is some kind of elaborate joke. Still nothing. Izuku clears his throat. Todoroki looks up from his plate of noodles and tilts his head. What are you doing? Eating, Todoroki answers obviously, but there's no sarcasm to it. He states it without inflection, and Izuku can't tell if he's messing with him or not. I can see that, he says, mouth twitching, but what are you doing? Eating lunch? No shit. Slapping a hand to his mouth, Izuku goes rigid when Todoroki pauses and calmly sets down his chopsticks. He didn't mean to say that, but he's so thrown off that the words flew from his mouth before he could censor himself. He expects anger or disgust, but he gets neither. Instead, Todoroki purses his lips together with a thoughtful look before saying, I'm confused, what answer are you looking for? Izuku blinks. Why are you sitting with me, Todoroki? Because you don't want to be here. Really? He can't help the slightly manic laugh that bubbles to his throat. What makes you think that? Todoroki, thankfully, doesn't look at all fazed. He levels Izuku with an inscrutable look and shrugs. Lucky guess? This time when he laughs, it's genuine. Todoroki remains impassive, and his gaze slides behind him, to the cafeteria beyond. He continues as if Izuku didn't just laugh at him. The rest of the class really wants to talk to you. You're all they've been talking about. It's exhausting. He guides a mouthful of soba to his lips and slurps noisily. Izuku only stares, rudeness be damned. Todoroki obviously doesn't care. So why sit with me if I'm so exhausting? They are not you. I want peace and quiet. They're too afraid to approach you. You're basically classmate repellent. Izuku feels like he should be offended, but the way Todoroki says it so plainly, so matter-of-factly, he just isn't. The hero student tilts his head, brow furrowing. It reminds Izuku vaguely of a dog. Unless you'd rather I leave? No, Izuku stutters. I don't really, you can stay. He leans forward. But seriously, you really don't have any questions? Like if I was actually quirkless, or how I know Bakugo? Todoroki takes a minute to respond. Izuku fidgets nervously at his wrists while he finishes chewing. Then, would you ask how I got my scar? The question throws him for a loop. Reflexively, his eyes fly to the burned patch of skin on his left side, to the angry red around a spot of bright azure. He looks away just as quickly, oddly embarrassed. No. Todoroki nods. Then I won't ask you. They finish lunch in relative silence after that, but Izuku decides that if Todoroki is being truthful, then that's not his problem. And it really doesn't seem to be. Weary, he occasionally looks up from his plate to see if Todoroki is fidgety, or regretting his choice, or worse, staring at him again. He's not. The bell rings to signal the end of lunch, and Izuku all but flies from his seat to toss his tray and get out of there. Beating the crowd, he opts to stand just outside the cafeteria doors to wait for the rest of 1A to funnel out, making himself small so as to divert attention from any other unwanted attention. The universe must be finished throwing him curveballs today, because he makes it back to the dorms without any further incident. Ignoring the attention on him as he hurries through the common room, Izuku books it to the stairs back to his room. Only once the door is locked securely behind him does he let himself relax, falling into his desk with a sigh. Almost on cue, his phone goes off. Never mind, universe. He doesn't have to look to know who it is. Sucking in a breath through his teeth, he answers the call. Hey, Izuku. Cringing, he pulls the phone away from his ear when his mom's voice comes booming through the receiver. He hits speaker and sets it down on the desk. How are you doing? Are they treating you well? Have you been eating, sleeping? Why haven't you answered any of my texts? You're worrying your mother to death. Ignoring the stab of guilt, he sighs, I'm fine, Mom. They're treating me fine. I have food and my own room, just like Nezu promised. I just haven't been checking my phone. Do they take it away from you? Are you only allowed a small amount of time to use it? I know it's not prison, right? Confiscating your phone was not in the agreement. Do I need to call your parole? No. He cuts in before she can start. He already regrets answering her, I just haven't checked. Really? Besides, even if that was the case, you couldn't do anything about it. I'm technically a criminal, remember? There's a long pause on her end. I don't think you should be there. You didn't break any laws. He closes his eyes. It was my third strike. He rehearses, like Nezu told him, like they agreed upon. They couldn't just let me go home like nothing happened. That's ridiculous. It's not like you could actually do anything. He grits his teeth. That's why they let you go the first 2 times. You're my baby. You couldn't hurt anyone or anything. This All Might thing has them worked up for nothing. I mean, really, putting you under parole in the heroics course. It sits irresponsible, that's what it is. Izuku, if those heroes hurt you, or you feel like you're in danger or uncomfortable. I said I'm fine. He doesn't mean to snap, but he can't help it. He presses his hands to his eyes and sighs. I'm sorry, it's been a long day, Mom. I'll do better about answering your texts. Good night. He hangs up before she can get another word in. The silence of the room is suddenly deafening, and he inhales slowly before his stupid tears can get any ground. The quiet of his room is too much. The frustrated tears he's managed to shove down double back with a vengeance, and he reaches for the nearest notebook and flips it open to a random page before they start to fall. Without really seeing the entry in front of him, Izuku retraces the faded graphite, pencil pressing sharply to the page. It's a long time after that there's a knock at the door. Looking up from his notes, he waits pensively for another sound before leaning across the table to check his phone. 11 o'clock. Has that much time really passed? Weary, Izuku stands, pads over to the door, and presses an ear to it. When nothing else happens, he unlocks it and cracks it open to peer out into the dark hallway. There's a plate at the door, piled high with rice, chicken and veggies. It has to be. It's a little annoying that the guy has apparently taken it upon himself to make sure Izuku doesn't starve, but maybe that's just his bad mood talking. With a quick look to make sure that the enthusiastic hero student isn't lurking around the corner to jump him, Izuku ducks out and makes a grab for the plate. It's no lunch rush, but it's not bad either. When morning comes, Izuku is dressed and outside his room before Eraserhead can heckle him. He doesn't go downstairs though. Instead, he perches at the top of the stairs like a solitary gargoyle and waits for the noise to die away downstairs. Aizawa only raises an eyebrow when he exits his room to see him, and Izuku stands up to trail after him. Except he was wrong. Not everyone has left for training. Once again Izuku is face to face with the son of the #1 hero, only this time he can't run away. Todoroki is leaning against the wall by the kitchen, blocking the only exit and scrolling quietly through his phone. He looks up when Aizawa steps into the room. Izuku is still on the bottom stair. "Good morning, sensei." "Get to class," Aizawa answers, sounding more tired than anything. The hero walks past him out the front door, and Todoroki tilts his chin towards Izuku. "Good morning, Midoriya." "Morning." Resigning himself to his fate, Izuku takes the last step down and approaches him cautiously. "You're waiting for me?" He tucks his phone into his uniform and nods at the counter to his left. "Ida asked me to make sure you got breakfast." It's only then that Izuku sees the bowl of fruit sitting there, alongside a protein bar. Something odd tugs in his chest, and he swallows down the feeling of cotton in his throat as he walks over and grabs an apple from the bowl and the bar. He pockets the latter and takes a bite of the apple. He doesn't quite know how to feel about this. Not only does Iida seem to be taking on some kind of mother-hen role, but now he's roped Todoroki into it? Maybe he should have taken his tray and left yesterday before people could make assumptions. "Thanks, I guess." Todoroki shrugs, then abruptly turns on his heel and starts to walk away. Izuku stands in place for all of 5 seconds before heading after him. They're looking at him again. He can feel it on the nape of his neck, but knowing that it's out of curiosity instead of animosity rubs at his nerves significantly less. All except one. He hasn't said anything to him since yesterday's confrontation, but Bakugo has been eyeing him ever since he stepped into class. Aggression rolls off of him in waves, so much so that even his classmates have gravitated away from him, except for that red-haired kid. He's the only one that dares to get close when Aizawa dismisses them to Gym Gamma. Izuku wonders if he has some kind of death wish. Still, he can't judge him too much when his insistence takes Bakugo's attention off him. He finds himself falling once more to the back of the pack, only this time he's not alone. "You mutter a lot. If you don't like it you can leave." Izuku keeps his eyes trained in front of him. He sees a few of the hero students throw furtive glances over their shoulders. When they catch his eye they spin back around and their chatter redoubles. Todoroki doesn't answer, but he doesn't leave either. Rinse and repeat. He doesn't know if Todoroki truly seeks out his company for means of escape, or if it's an elaborate trap set in motion by Ida to make sure he doesn't starve himself. Maybe it's both? He tells himself he doesn't care and it doesn't matter, and dutifully ignores Todoroki's presence in class, training, and lunch. All the way back to the dorm, where he scurries to his room and locks himself inside like a hermit. It's easy enough to do, since he has his notebooks. It goes like this until Friday, and when it no longer feels like 1A is looking at him like a new toy, he lets his guard drop, just a little. This is a mistake. Eraserhead hasn't commented on his note-taking, And Izuku hasn't yet become desperate enough to ask for any textbooks, so he takes advantage of his totally not state-mandated prison time to get some close-up analysis done on UA's newest batch of heroes. Todoroki materializes out of thin air behind Izuku at Gym Gamma, and Izuku nearly decks him out of reflex. What do you write in there? Instead, he snaps the book shut and puts healthy distance between the two of them. Seriously, when did he get there? He could have sworn Todoroki was just across the gym not 2 minutes ago. None of your business. He'd feel bad, but Todoroki hasn't minded his bluntness before, so he shouldn't now. I saw a drawing of me, so I think it is, he says, and just like that, the feeling of ice water goes down his spine. Izuku pulls his notebook to his chest and musters his best glare, one that makes grown criminals flinch, thank you. But Todoroki doesn't so much as twitch. Neither of them move, and Izuku isn't willing to speak first. Their silence stretches on for a handful of seconds then. You were writing something about my quirk. A lot about it, actually. Biting his cheek, Izuku gets ready to wind up on another 1A student's shit list, but loses steam with the next words that come out of Todoroki's mouth. What are your thoughts? Aiha. On my quirk. You, Izuku untenses, only slightly, you want my thoughts about your quirk? Aizawa-sensei said you were a competent vigilante. You have experience, and you must have been at least decent if he praised you. Well, he doesn't really know if you could call that praise, but whatever. Okay? Why are you asking me for help? Our provisional license exam is next week. I need to pass. So? Ask Eraserhead. I didn't like his suggestions. By this point Izuku's gone from weary to perplexed. No one had ever asked to see his notes before, not ever. They were more liable to call him a stalker than ask for his input. He takes a quick look around. No one seems to be paying much attention to them, absorbed as they are in their training. Eraserhead is currently speaking with the invisible girl. His eyes catch Ida's for a brief moment, but the other boy startles and hastily looks away, jogging over to ectoplasm. That's probably suspicious, but if the worst Ida's going to do is feed him and sick Todoroki on him, it's not too concerning. When he looks back at said hero student, he's still waiting patiently for an answer. Izuku's attention flicks to Todoroki's scar, and his stomach twists uncomfortably. He can guess what Eraserhead's suggestion was. Izuku has a whole rant in his entry on Todoroki after all. No fire, right? For the first time since they've started these strange interactions, Todoroki's eyes go flinty. Right? And that's the exact moment Izuku's resolve crumbles. Sighing, he lets his hands fall to his sides. Have you tried projectiles? It takes exactly 5 hours to regret his decision to help. That night, when he scurried up to his room and locked the door, something breaks the normalcy of his schedule. Izuku is anxiously scrolling through his mom's newest slew of texts when there's a soft crinkle at the foot of his door. He freezes, eyes locking on the door. Something slides through to the other side, and he counts to 30 before sliding to the floor and padding over to investigate. He bends down to snatch them, flicking through them quickly. Then he reads through them again. And a third time for good measure. Their Quirk reports. Okay, maybe reports is a strong word, because they contain the bare minimum of information and are anything but official. It's a stack of 4, and they're written in different handwriting, ranging from near illegible scrawl to neat, sharp writing. There are names at the top, and it's easy to match names to faces with the Quirk description accompanying them. Ida Tenya, Uraraka Ochako, Ajuitu, and he frowns at the last one. Kirishima Aijuru. He's at a loss for exactly why they decided to give him these, until he notices a note scribbled on the back of Ida's. Midoriya, pardon our forwardness, but a few of us have noticed your interest in quirks. After Todoroki's new implementation of techniques, after your rendezvous in Gym Gamma today, we realized you may be interested in our quirks as well. Please, feel free to take what notes you may from these entries. If you are so inclined, we would be honored to receive any suggestions towards improving our quirks that you may have. Sincerely, Ida Tenya. Izuku is out the door and down the stairs before he can register his feet moving. The sounds of 1A talking and laughing ups in volume until he rounds the last set of stairs and comes to a stop at the foot of the staircase. The room falls silent. He doesn't mind it, zeroing in on the meddlesome hero kid and storming over. What is your deal? Izuku asks, frowning up at Ida. He's standing over the pink-skinned girl mid-lecture about her feet propped up on the coffee table, and he quickly snaps out of his shocked smile at him. Damn, what are they feeding these guys? Why are they all so damn tall? Midoriya. It is wonderful to see you joining the rest of us. Though I'm confused. What is my deal? For these, he says, flapping the papers in his face. Oh, are quirks. Yes, well, seeing as you seem quite adept at. Somebody sneezes, and it hits him that he's at the center of attention of far too many people. Standing straighter, Izuku grabs Ida by his sleeve and hauls him towards the stairs. Once in the safety of the stairwell, Izuku whirls on him. What do you want from me, Ida? I am not sure what you are asking. You set food out for me at night, you make sure Todoroki gets me breakfast, you smile and act all nice and now you're asking for my advice? What the fuck do you want from me? The vulgarity is unnecessary, he says with a frown, and Izuku resists the urge to yank his hair out. But if that is what you mean by my deal, then I believe I can explain myself. Then please do. I want you to feel welcome. As class rep, it is my duty to make sure that all members of 1A are taking care of themselves. I'm not a part of your class, Ida. True, but for the time being you are. He gestures to the papers that Izuku has been waving around, and you're clearly talented. Our provisional license exams are in 2 days, and we have an experienced, outside source that is interested in our quirks. I figured that meeting you halfway in a common interest would be a good idea. Uraraka, Azui, and Kirishima thought so too. All at once, Izuku feels very tired. He presses his hands to his face and bites back a groan. If I have caused you stress, I apologize. Izuku peeks up at him through a scowl. As annoying as his meddling is, he sounds legitimately concerned. I'll give you feedback, he says, and holds up a finger before Ida can launch into another spiel. I'll give you feedback, but it does not mean I want to be your friend. Or anyone's friend. I'm doing it so they don't get rusty. My analytic skills. And because the world desperately needs competent heroes with a full understanding of their skill set. Says it with a snarl, but Ida is smiling in a way that makes him want to tear the papers in half. Of course. He squints. I mean it. Not friends. Not buddies. I don't like heroes and I don't like 1A. Are we clear? His smile widens. Crystal? Great. Later that night, when 6 more papers find themselves under his door, Izuku seriously weighs the cons and pros of auto-defenestration. This is where we're taking our exam? It's huge. Ashido gawks, 2 steps off the bus and somehow louder than she was inside the bus. The rest of his class have similar remarks. Shoyuta slinks his way to the front of the gaggle of students and flashes his quirk. It gets the desired effect, but they're still practically vibrating with excitement. Remember, you're not here to sightsee. Now more than ever it's imperative that you all be prepared for your future careers as heroes. And maybe that was a little too sobering. A somber befalls the group. That said, you've all been working hard. I'm sure you'll do just fine representing UA. There, never let Hizashi say he can't give out encouragement. Already his class is alight with focused intensity. Ida gives them a few more rousing words. Honestly, the kid does his job for him in that regard, and just like that they're bounced back. Shoyuta tells them to stay put by the bus while he figures out the sign-in, just in time for a few Shiketsu students to wander over and start making noise, scoping out the competition. Come on, problem child, he says to his ever-present shadow since they pulled away from the school. Midoriya hurries after him, muttering something under his breath. To his relief, the kid has been less of a problem than he was expecting. After the Bakugo incident was sorted out, there had been no more outbursts, and he'd actually started interacting with the class. And training them, too, presumably putting to use all that muttering and note-taking he does when he thinks Shoyuta isn't paying attention. Initially he'd been concerned with what exactly he was doing, but after unlocking his room during lunch one day and skimming through the collection of notebooks, he was intrigued to discover the full extent to Midoriya's writing. The kid is a veritable genius. It's no wonder why he was so successful on his own as a vigilante. There were entries on just about every pro in a 30-mile radius, including himself. Which, while explaining why Midoriya recognized him on that first day, still didn't explain how he recognized him. Shoyuta is more anal about his privacy than the average underground hero, and he's certain that he never came across Midoriya before the stain incident. He chose to file that information in "I'll think about that later," and observed with a scrutinizing eye as slowly most of 1A sought out Midoriya's opinions over the past 3 days. There was no harm to it, the opposite actually, and his students would need every edge they could to put up a fight against the rest of the students here today. Midoriya sticks close to him, hunched and quiet, but Shoyuta catches the way his eyes scan the building, the people. Even now that brain of his is running a mile a minute. He's going to have a serious talk with Nezu about fixing the absolute disaster that is UA's enrollment policies. This kid has more potential than most students he's dealt with, and they had completely glossed over him. Shoyuta gets them checked in, then makes it back to his class in time to de-escalate an argument between Bakugo and one of Joke's kids. "Save the bickering for the exam," he says, before shooing them inside. Speak of the devil. Eraserhead, Joke appears from out of thin air and loops an arm around his neck. "You old dog. Avoiding me again? Hey Joke. Let go of me." Maybe. Marry me? Absolutely not. A snort at his side reminds him of the problem child currently stuck to him, and he ducks beneath her arm to straighten out his scarf. Joke smiles, unfazed. "One day you'll say yes." "Who's this? You ban another kid from taking the exam this year?" Her eyes go big when she notices the cuffs, and then dart back up to him. I'm not one of his," Midoriya deadpants before he can explain. "I'm here against my will." Shoyuta can feel his hair turning gray. Nezu opened a vigilante reform program. This is Midoriya. No vigilante name. He opened a what now? Wait, in a rare instance, Joke's smile fumbles. "The guy in my patrol route stopped poking around a while ago. Is this the kid who picked up your slack in downtown Mizudafu?" "Yes," Midoriya says, picking idly at his cuffs. "You do good work, better than a lot of Limelight pros, but there's always crime that slips through the cracks." Midoriya's eyes flick up to him briefly before turning back to his hands. He mutters something, and it sounds an awful lot like "for most people at least." Shoyuta knows an out when he sees one. "Sorry, he has a mouth and I'm not paid enough to keep it in check. See you inside." He leaves Joke with her jaw on the floor and for once, stunned, blessedly silent. "Quit picking at those," he says, flashing his quirk while he ushers the two of them through the building's illogically large doors. He just wants today to be over with. This building is too big, 1A is too loud, there are too many eyes on him, and his quirk suppressant cuffs are making him self-conscious. Thankfully, once they're all checked in, he gets to follow Aizawa out of the main room to the stands where the teachers can watch. He expected some form of scolding after Ms. Joke, but the man hasn't done any more than whisk them away. Izuku suspects that he hates being here as much as he does, and honestly, given one his history with public outings, the feeling is warranted. A labyrinth of hallways takes them up to the observation level, though Izuku suspects Aizawa is taking more turns than necessary to make sure he can't find his way around without an escort. They make it to their seats and sit in an uncomfortable silence. After a few minutes he sees Ms. Joke enter through one of the doors, but she takes a look at the both of them and sits a few rows away. Next to him, Aizawa slumps just a little more in his seat. Far down below, the overworked hero commission test proctor explains the rules of the test, and Izuku settles in for the long haul. At the very least, this will be interesting to watch. Time to see if any of them actually listen to me. Todoroki Shudo is her target. Honestly, in any normal circumstance, she knows that Shochan would totally overwhelm her in a fight. He held off Moonfish during their raid, and he was even more agile than her with those pretty teeth of his. But these aren't normal circumstances, and people are easiest to hurt when they least expect it. The security here is excellent, especially after they killed All Might, which is why Shiggy had Kurogiri warp her into the girl's bathroom. Himiko puts her victim into a chokehold, smothering her protests with her sleeve until she goes limp in her arms. It's not a UA student, but then, with all eyes on you, nobody would ever think to notice if a Shiketsu student were to be acting off. All she has to do is not get tagged, easy peasy, get close to Shochan as Ochako-chan, and kill him. Oh, it'll be so much fun. If his scar is anything to go off of, he'll look so handsome covered in blood. And then that awful Endeavor guy will be that much easier to deal with, and the doctor will want to help the League when he sees how good Shiggy is at leading. Himiko sinks her fangs into the Shiketsu girl's neck and drinks, feeling the warmth of her blood seep from her head to her toes. She pulls back and licks her lips, before reaching for a syringe at her thigh strap to take a little more blood, just in case. The blood loss will keep her unconscious for longer, and should serve as a good getaway disguise. Kurogyri is on standby in case she needs an emergency exit, but that shouldn't be necessary. In a matter of seconds, Himiko is transformed, and she emerges from the stall with an entirely different identity. She washes her hands, because she was still in a bathroom and she isn't gross, dries off, and skips outside. A student wearing the same uniform as her waves her over and she smiles, hurrying over. Come on, Cammy. The exam is about to start. Coming. Tenya sits at the desktop in his room, typing furiously into his keyboard. There are several tabs open on his screen, bookmarks from his hasty searching the previous morning. Befriending antisocial people. How to make friends. How to make friends with ex-vigilantes. How to coax antisocial friends out of rooms. Feral humans and how to befriend. How to tame feral cats. How to attract friends with food. How to make sure my child is eating nutritious food. Not for the first time, Izuku wonders exactly how much money the HPSC has tucked away in its coffers. He watches a Ketsubutsu kid with some sort of earthquake quirk take down the equivalent of a city block and thinks, too much. Class 1A is faring well enough. No one has been taken out despite pretty much all participants gunning for them at the starting whistle. They may be loud and annoying 90% of the time, but there's no denying they work hard. Izuku absolutely does not sit up in his seat when he notices several of them taking his advice to heart. Nope. Even Todoroki, who peeled off from the rest of them as soon as the exam started, is doing what he suggested, keeping his attacks localized and restrained, so as to keep from succumbing to frostbite while maximizing offense and minimizing collateral damage. It really is a shame that he doesn't want to use his fire, though. If he has that much power and fine control of his right, imagine the things he could pull off if he trained his left. He probably has something bordering on pyrokinesis, if his manipulation of ice is anything to go off of. Izuku spares a look at Aizawa, who's been leaning back in his seat since the exam began. To anyone else, it may look like the hero is dozing, but he's been watching intensely from beneath his hooded gaze. For a moment, he considers straight up asking him if he has any intention of looking into whatever's up with Todoroki. Eraserhead isn't stupid, in fact he's far from it. There's a reason why Izuku never patrolled where the hero regularly prowled. He suspects it's the same reason why Nezu stuck him with him instead of any of the other pros that taught at UA. He has to know something is up with Todoroki. Izuku knows, and he's only spent a week with him. Aizawa's eyes flick to meet his own. What? He gets drowned out by a loud buzz, and the proctor announcing that someone named Inasa Yurashi has made it to the next round. Nothing, he says, turning back to the arena. He feels the hero give him one hard look before turning his attention back to the cityscape below. Izuku has to blink several times to make sure he's seeing things correctly. Down below, a massive portion of the fake city has been completely blown away, debris and unconscious hero hopefuls strewn about. They're covered in the sticky red tags they were given at the start of the exam, and he watches with no small shock at the student, Inasa, who stands at the epicenter, and scathed. He tips back his hat with a smile, and stomps proudly away from the scene of destruction. People tend to forget about how strong students from other schools are, since UA is often at the forefront of Japan's attention, Aizawa drawls, but they're no laughing matter. Inasa actually placed higher than Todoroki in the recommended entrance exams. Izuku frowns. Really? Really? At that moment, the temperature in the arena plummets, and Izuku looks just in time to see Todoroki freeze a handful of would-be attackers in place. He calmly walks over to each of them in turn, sticking a marker to their targets. There's a buzz and the proctor drones. Todoroki Shudo, passed. Please head to the waiting room. But not by too much. His fingers twitch, reaching for a pen or pencil that's not there. He watches Inesa finally make it to the other side of the arena to the entrance of the waiting room, and wonders to what extent Inesa can manipulate wind. He's 90% sure he can orchestrate a way to find out. I need to use the restroom. A handful of seconds pass. You can hold it? I can also piss on the floor, so... The look Aizawa shoots him is so disgusted, he can't help the snort that escapes him. The hero stands abruptly, and Izuku does with him, but instead of leading the way like he anticipates, Aizawa raises a hand. Joke. Izuku's eyes follow the gesture to where the heroine is sitting a few seats behind them. She perks up, flashing a bright smile. Sho Yuta, can you take my brat to the restroom? The smile falls, sure. To her credit, Ms. Joke pulls the same trick Eraserhead did, leading him down a convoluted series of turns and halls until they arrive at their destination. Fortunately for him, he's a little more perceptive than they give him credit for. All they've really managed to do is give him a bigger map of the testing grounds building to work with. Also fortunately, Joke is just as easy to slip past as she is on patrol. Izuku ducks out of the bathroom the moment her back is turned, and is halfway to the lobby with absolutely zero issue. Despite the high security within and around the event, he's able to make his way down without any issue. Seriously, it's concerning how much you can get away with when you look like you know what you're doing. Within a few minutes he's made his way down to the waiting room by the testing grounds, where he's met with his first obstacle. Who are you? You can't be down here. A large security guard with a RAM mutation stops him at the entrance. Looking around him, Izuku catches a glimpse of Inesa laughing with another student who must have passed in the time it took him to ditch Ms. Joke. I'm a ward of UA, he answers, reaching into his pocket to fish out his ID. These are my classmates. Eraserhead gave me permission to come down. The man blinks, leaning in to get a closer look, then straightens up with a huff. Alright, but I'll be out of your hair in a few minutes, thank you. Across the room, tucking into a packed lunch supplied by the event, Todoroki looks vaguely surprised when Izuku squeezes past the guard. He raises a hand in greeting, and before he can think better of it, Izuku waves back. Then he's on a beeline towards the loud, towering Shiketsu student. Inesa Yorashi, Izuku calls, flashing him his brightest smile. He seemed like the friendly type before, if a bit obnoxious, if his interaction with the rest of UA was telling. Hey, you're that moody, quiet kid with UA's group. How can I help you? Hit the nail right on the head. It's always nice when Izuku meets people that aren't thrown off by all of his quirk questions, and Inesa all but matches his own enthusiasm about his quirk. Quite a few more students funnel in through the testing grounds, including several familiar faces, but if they notice him, they're too off-put by Inesa's size and volume to approach them. He's listening intently to Inesa's explanation about how he manipulates wind currents, but he's also acutely aware of the people in the room. He figures he has 10 minutes before he's found out, maybe 15 if Joke tries to look for him herself before admitting to Eraserhead that she lost him in the first place, and while he's willing to face the consequences of his actions, he'd rather not be taken by surprise, thanks. Which is why it's so disconcerting when Inesa pauses mid-laugh and his eyes lock onto someone over Izuku's head. Yo Cammy! Great to see you made it through. On instinct he turns to look at whoever Cammy is, and does a double take when he notices the tall brunette a few feet away. He's been cataloging the people trickling in this whole time, and she is wholly unfamiliar. Cammy looks surprised too, spinning to face the two of them. Immediately, he's on edge. She smiles, and there's something off about it. It pulls too tight, comes too quick, and though she meets Inesa's gaze, her attention almost immediately flicks to the side. Hey, she says, and almost reluctantly changes course to walk over. There's a strange movement to her gait. She walks on the balls of her feet, light and quick, and Izuku realizes why he didn't notice her. She's quiet, even for the low rumble of the room, and she walks like she is acutely aware of every movement she makes. Despite the heavy boots on her feet, she doesn't so much as make a scuff. How was the first round? It was alright, I guess. He tunes their conversation out. She's talking, smiling, engaging with her classmate like it's a perfectly normal conversation, and by all means it is. But there's something nudging at his instincts, That sixth sense that sends you looking over your shoulder that whispers wrong, 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 the same instinct that he's learned to listen to after so much time spent as a vigilante. Cammy keeps looking at something. It's subtle, but every few seconds her gaze flits to something off in the room, too quick for Izuku to get a good lock on whatever it is that has her attention. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce you. My bad, this is Midoriya, he's with 1A. Oh. And then those eyes are on him. Maintaining his smile, Izuku ducks his head and forces himself to look bashful. He pulls it off, but there's something downright predatory in the way she looks at him that makes him want to disappear. Why yeah, but I'm not taking the exam with you guys. I don't remember seeing you on TV at the sports festival, she purrs. Why are they keeping such a cutie from the eyes of the public? A hand finds its way on his forearm, and before he can help it, his hand flies to snatch it off of him. Izuku keeps his smile light, and so does she, but the air between them goes dreadfully tense. Sorry, he finally says, releasing her hand. It drops to her side, well away from him. I'm new to the class, but training is intense, you know? Keeps you on your toes. Right? Cammy nods, but instead of dissipating, the threat in the air only grows stronger. Hey, I gotta go grab lunch, but good luck in round 2. It was nice to meet you, cutie-san. Her smile grows impossibly wider, and before either of them can say anything she's off. Inesa calls something, but Izuku is too busy watching her disappear into the throng of people that have made their way into the room. She moves like before, and he thoroughly believes she would have vanished into the crowd had he not been looking for her. It's skilled, the way she moves. The way he moves, the way underground heroes move. The way Stain moved, his mind whispers, and the hairs on his arms stand up. What's her quirk? He asks suddenly, not looking away. Please be something stealth-based, please be something stealth-based, please. Glamour, I think? She can cast visual and audio illusions, I'm pretty sure. And call it paranoia, but Izuku bids him a rushed goodbye and hurries after her. There's a decent number of contestants between them, but all he has to do is keep his eyes on her hat as it weaves between bodies. Izuku follows suit, moving fluidly between people to catch up with her. The mob thins out, making it easier to follow, and all at once it becomes very clear where she's headed. A small group of 1A students are gathering on the far side of the room, where he saw Todoroki a few minutes ago. Like a homing beacon, Cammy picks up the pace, moving with brutal, silent efficiency. From her uniform sleeve, Izuku catches the light glint off something metallic, and if his instincts were on edge before, they're outright screaming now. Hey, he says, voice tight, hand gripping the cuff of her sleeve. Cammy whips around, pupils shrunk like pinpricks. She smiles. It feels like he's staring down a leopard. Cutie-san, she sings songs, sending chills up his spine. I'd love to talk to you later, but I thought grabbing was a no-go for you? Should I call you Hypocrite-san instead? Should I call security? I'm pretty sure knives aren't allowed in the building. For the second time in half as many minutes, Himiko finds herself staring down the stang, green-eyed kid and thinking dangerous, he's dangerous. It makes her giddy. He's small and unassuming, but he looked at her like he was going to carve her to pieces, and she loves it. He'd even snuck up on her. On her. Who was this 1A kid, and why hadn't the league seen him until now? He would make a much better villain than that explodey guy. What knife? She blinks, doe-eyed, but even that doesn't faze him. If anything, the grip on her uniform gets tighter. Open your hand. For a moment, she considers it. Considers unsheathing her blade and digging it right in the soft spot of his neck, to see how pretty the red of his blood would look against the green of his hair. But if she did that, then her cover would be blown and the mission would be a bust. Shiggy would be furious, the doctor would be disappointed, and they'd still be living in that crummy apartment. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the decision is made for her when the sleepy hobo man from UA storms into the room. Midoriya must really be a part of UA, because he sees him at the same time she does and goes sheet white. Problem child, he hisses, with all the vehemence of Kurogiri when she and Dabi accidentally set the bar on fire one time. He's flagged by some other hero teacher, one with green hair, and in the resultant chaos she's able to slip away into the crowd of rapidly retreating students. There goes her chances of covertly offing Todoroki. Oh well, she thinks as she watches him get towed off, there's always the second round of the exam. I thought you were smart enough not to pull anything stupid, Shoyuta seeds. Clearly I was wrong. He nudges the kid forward with his capture scarf when Midoriya gives him a withering glance over his shoulder. Shoyuta doesn't bother with leading him on a roundabout journey back up to the bleachers, because that had been so effective the first time. They walk in single file, Midoriya in the front so Shoyuta can keep his eyes on him, and Emi nervously taking up the rear. If I hadn't, then an intruder would have gotten through security without ever being found out. Something that you should really look into, by the way. If Shoyuta rolled his eyes any harder, they'd pop from his skull. Security is tighter than it has ever been. ID scans, metal detectors, triple guard postings, state-of-the-art camera installation. Keep walking. Because that all worked so well to stop me. You abused your UAID, as well as your connection to me. In no time, they make it back to the large arch that leads back out to the observation deck. They walk through, and Shoyuta gestures back to their seats. Now sit down, shut up, and I might consider keeping this little stunt away from Nezu and the detective. He crosses his arms, immovable, staring him down when Midoriya pointedly does not take his seat. Behind them, Emi clears her throat. If this is all good then I'm just gonna? You really think I would lie about something like this? That Shiketsu girl? I don't know what to think, he cuts off. Unconsciously, he activates his quirk, eyes flashing, because any semblance of trust one had towards you the moment you snuck away from a hero to go goofing off. You seem to have forgotten the reason you're here, Midoriya, and it's not to go sightseeing whenever you feel like it. Shoyuta? What? He lets the silence ring out. How you act reflects greatly on this school. For whatever reason, Nezu decided to stick his neck out for you, after all the bad press we have been receiving. The world is watching us, Midoriya, for one more slip-up, one more screw-up, and if we give them even an inch there will be hell to pay. And it won't just be for you, since you have your parole through his program. He points down towards the arena, where they seem to be setting up for the second half of the exam. It'll be for all of those kids down there that have given it their all to be here today. I need you to understand that by sneaking off and putting your interests first, you put their futures in danger. Do you know what could have happened if that security guard had reported you for suspicious activity? 1A would have been disqualified for potential cheating, and the entire exam would have been stopped. Your actions have consequences, Midoriya. That's why you're here in the first place. Midoriya's eyes are red, wet with unshed tears, but Shoyuta has a hunch that it's not because he's feeling sorry for himself. Geez, Shoyuta, Joke whispers, maybe take it easier on the kid, yeah? No harm, no foul. He's not just some kid, Joke, he says, not looking away from Midoriya, he's a criminal on parole. He's not stupid, and I'm not going to coddle him like he is. Midoriya's voice is cutting, acrid venom being spat through grit teeth. I'll admit what I did was reckless, okay? Shoyuta sighs, lets his quirk deactivate. Go. I'm not finished. It was reckless and selfish. I'll see cop to that. I'll tell Nezu myself when we get back to you, and he can call his little detective and that snake hero Nighteye, and you can wave your awful problem child goodbye while they cart me off to Tartarus? But you can do that after we go find the test proctor and tell them to stop the exam. I couldn't care less about what happens to me, but there's an intruder mixed in with the examinees down there, and she's armed and dangerous. You think my stunt would make UA look bad? Then think about what'll happen if one of your students winds up dead. The entirety of the stadium shakes with the force of several explosions. The three of them stumble, grasping at the railing to keep from falling over from the shock of it. Shoyuta bristles as the entire mock city goes down, creating a disaster area. Far up above, a loud whirring sound of industrial AC takes over, nearly as loud as the explosion itself. Snow falls in cascades over the wreckage, smothering the destruction in a blanket of thick snow in a matter of seconds. Jesus! The proctor's voice drones over the intercom about the students' tasks for the next part of the exam, but Shoyuta can't hear it over the rush of blood in his ears. The entire stadium has become a kind of war zone. It's ideal for simulating a rescue scenario, yes, but any of the security cameras for observing the students caught in the blast would have been destroyed. What the fuck were they thinking? It takes a little while to recover from the shock, as the remaining 100 hero students all begin to pour out over the new snowy terrain. It's the perfect cover for a disaster. Eraserhead, please. A few tears are falling freely now, but all of the anger on the kid's face has vanished. He looks horrified, pale, white-knuckling the railing so hard that his bones pop. Terrified eyes turn to look at him, and Shoyuta feels the reality of the situation hit him like a sucker punch. He's not lying. Emi's voice floats weakly between them. What? She looks back and forth between the two of them. For real? How can you tell? You don't seriously believe there's a villain down there, right? I don't know, joke, but do you really want to risk it? Your kids are down there too. She sucks in a breath. Oh, I don't. Get to the test proctor, tell him there's been a security breach and the kids are in danger and he needs to stop the exam, he says, hopping up to perch on the railing. His scarf unravels, reaching down to the level below them. I'm going down there. Kid, what did the intruder look like? Midoriya snaps out of whatever shock that he's in, instead taking on a calculating manner. He launches into a breakdown. Tall, brunette, with shoulder-length hair. She's wearing a shiketsu uniform, is carrying at least one knife on her person, and is currently responding to the name Cammy. However, it's likely that she's a villain with either a shape-changing or puppeteering quirk since she snuck in with the examinees, so I wouldn't rule out any suspicious behavior you see with a student not matching that exact description. Great, just perfect. That means he's essentially going in blind. But Midoriya seems to be holding something back. He bites his lip, brow furrowed. He bites back the urge to snap and probes calmly. What else is there, problem child? I really hope I'm wrong, but I think she's after someone from 1A. Possibly Bakugo. Because of course they are. It's the summer camp nightmare all over again, this time without Mandalay's quirk to warn them. At least that's narrowed his search a bit, find his problem children, and he'll probably find whoever it is that's made it their mission to go after them. But Shoyuta is a professional, and instead of letting his worry show, he instead looks to Ms. Joke. You got all that, Joke? Loud and clear, she nods. I'll let them know and they'll have all participants evacuate the arena. Get down there, Eraserhead. Save those kids. Then she's gone, running back through the door they came from, and there's at least a little relief that they'll soon have at least one thing under control. Should is about to pitch himself over the railing when Midoriya clears his throat. What do you want me to do, Eraserhead? Headache already building, Shoyuta levels Midoriya with the most stern glare he can manage. Nothing. You're not a hero, no more than the kids down there. You are to stay put and wait for me to return. Do you understand? There's a split second where he thinks Midoriya will actually fight him on this, but it's only that, a split second. His lips purse with distaste, but the kid nods. Understood. Good. With that, he sails over the ledge, instinctively rolling his body to land safely before sending out his capture weapon to grab onto the next ledge. It's a long way down, good think falling is faster than the stairs. Izuku watches Eraserhead drop into the arena below, counts to 30, then hops the railing himself. He lands, rolling easily to a stop. Hey, kid, Izuku turns to see a few other heroes, teachers from the other schools, probably, mid-stand, rising from their seats. Where are you going? Where is Eraser? He vaults down to the next floor before they can finish, then the next and the next. They're heroes. If they're worth their salt, they'll either try to intervene or find out for themselves. It takes 5 drops to finally hit the freshly fallen snow of the stadium below, and few teachers do try to stop him. If there's anything he's good at though, it's evading capture. He rolls, twists, dodges and sprints to the edge of the disaster zone, yelling over his shoulder. The exam is compromised. Find your students and evacuate them. From there, he melts into the snowy cityscape. It's freezing. All around him are debris and destruction, collapsed buildings and smoking asphalt. Izuku notes the large imprints of Eraserhead's feet in the fallen snow, and veers quickly in the opposite direction. Partly because he doesn't want to get caught, and partly because if they split up, they'll cover more ground. Izuku passes several students on his run, all in various stages of rescue or planning, that he doesn't bother stopping. None of them are 1A students, have any reason to believe him or recognize him, and so trying to get them to evacuate would be a waste of breath and time. Besides, he reasons, they're not 1A, so they're probably not in immediate danger. Ms. Joke and the others will get them out just fine. He's pretty sure he knows who the intruder is after anyways. Bakugo. Not only did the League fail to turn him last time, but they lost their leader in the process. If there's any student worth targeting, for revenge or otherwise, it's Bakugo. Luckily, he's one of the easier people to find. You just have to follow the yelling. He's acutely aware of the passing minutes as he runs, heart beating madly with adrenaline and fear. Cold air stings his lungs, but he ignores the pain. Every minute lost is another minute closer to disaster. Why haven't they shut down the exam yet? What is Ms. Joke doing? Midoriya? Izuku rounds a pulverized city block and nearly falls over himself, trying not to slip and fall face first onto the concrete. Chest heaving, he comes to a stop and looks wildly around for whoever called him. It's not Bakugo, but it's a step in the right direction for finding him. Uraraka, he calls, jogging over. She has one of the HPSC elderly actors cradled in her arms and, despite her shivering, has a good hold on them. What are you doing down here? You're not one of the... Stop talking to your buddy. The old man snaps, and they both jump. I could be dying of hypothermia. This is no time to shoot the breeze. Minus points. Uraraka winces, but Izuku ignores him. Where's Bakugo? He asks, cutting to the chase. You're all in danger. Someone here is after your class, and I think their target might be him. You need to find everyone and tell them to get back to the waiting room. Her eyes go wide. W8, the League is here? Maybe we don't know yet. Eraserhead is trying to find out. Have you seen Kabakugo? Please, tell me if you have. Excuse me, the actor says, I don't know what's going on here, but it's not funny. If you're going to continue this... His patience snaps. Would you shut the hell up? There are actually fucking lives at stake here. What's your name, young man? He asks, wiggling free of Uraraka's hold. He jabs at his chest with a gnarled finger. I'll have you failed immediately. The crunch of snow alerts them to a new presence. Uravity, hey girl, what are you doing back here? You ditch Shuto or some T Midoriya? 3 sets of eyes turn to face a startled newcomer. Izuku recognizes her immediately. It's Ashido, the girl with the acid quirk. She was one of the students that asked for his help with quirk ideas. She still hasn't approached him directly, not like Ida or Todoroki, but she is one of the students Izuku could see himself actually tolerating at some point. Right now, though, she looks surprised and uneasy, especially when she realizes the mess she's unintentionally waltzed into. I'm here for a reason, he says quickly, ignoring the sinking feeling in his stomach. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Bakugo isn't their target this time. What was that about Todoroki? She takes a step back. Uravity? Was just with him? No, I wasn't, Uraraka says slowly. Me and Froppy were sent over here, to the southwest sector. That's what I said, but you told me you'd finished the southwest sector. For the love of there's no time for this. How long ago did you see them? He butts in. Like, 5-ish minutes ago? They both have good quirks for supporting busted structures, so they went off too. Where? In a flash, he's closed the distance between them. Ashido yelps, holding her hands out, and takes another step back. Where did they go? Shuto scowls down at his bare hands, perfectly at ease in the cold. It's not fire, but it's still irksome that his father's quirk is useful to him in this setting. His left side isn't chilly at all, it's perfectly comfortable. He can feel the left side of his quirk just beneath its surface, coiled, strong, ready to be summoned at any moment. It does little help to think that his mother's side of the quirk is making this just as easy, but at least he can rely on that to help people. Dropping his hands to his sides, he pulls his attention back to the moment at hand. The blistering cold, to everyone else, whips around him and the destroyed city, promising death to anyone trapped for too long. He and Uraraka split up and agreed to investigate the further reaches of the arena to look for civilians that may have been overlooked in the initial search. So far they've had no luck. Normally he'd prefer to work alone, He did just fine in the first half of the exam, but there was an emphasis on teamwork for this portion, and Uraraka had approached him with pretty solid reasoning. If he had to work with someone to pass, he'd much rather it be a familiar face. Besides, the students giving out orders had been about to pair him off with that giant KitKateC guy, and he looked about as hospitable as Bakugo. Todoroki might be tone-deaf on a good day, but he knew better than to look a gift horse in the mouth. "Shudo, I found something." "Right, the exam." Shaking from his thoughts, Todoroki turns to face Uraraka. She jogs over, shivering from the cold. "Where?" he says, willing his left side to release a little more heat. She visibly relaxes, stepping a little closer, and smiles. "Over in that building." She points to a half-collapsed convenience store across the fake highway. "There's a fallen support beam trapping someone, but I need your ice to support the roof so I can lift it." "Let's go," he says, breaking into a sprint. He can hear his classmates' boots crunching through layers of snow behind him, and he picks up the pace. Inside the convenience store the lights are shot, but a hole in the ceiling lets in light from the outside, as well as a steady sprinkle of falling snow. There's shelves tipped over, piled on top of each other, with fake items scattered in the steadily building snowfall, but nothing immediately catches his eye. "Hello? Is anyone here?" he calls, stepping inside. His voice echoes back. "I'm the pro hero Shudo. I'm here to help. Please, say something if you can hear me." More silence. A can crunches under his boot as he walks farther in. "Uravity, where did you?" It's years of Endeavor's brutal training tactics that cause him to move. The air around them goes lethally still, the hairs on the back of his neck stand up and survival instinct screams at him to move. He lurches forward, trying to spin himself around. He's not fast enough. White-hot pain stabs into his thigh, and it's all he can do to bite his tongue to keep from screaming out. He swipes out with his right hand, sending ice flying out in a small blizzard of hail. He takes a step back to regain his balance and his vision goes white with pain. His knee buckles and he slips, crashing back into a display shelf and collapsing to the ground. It's then that he looks up and sees someone. Definitely not Uravity. A girl, blonde and grinning, stands at a crouch a few meters away by the entrance. If any of his ice managed to hit her, the wounds are covered by a thick sludge that melts off her body. His focus quickly turns, however, to the knife dripping with blood in her hand. It falls to the floor, staining the snow. There's a trail of it leading back to him. "Oh, good reflexes." The stranger croons, "Looks like the number one trained you well. But not well enough, I guess." She tips her head to the side, her sharp-toothed grin stretching wider. "You look so pretty, Xiaochen. Let's make you even prettier." And she moves. Fast, too fast. He panics, flings up a wall of ice between the both of them. But it's frail and thin, a far cry from his usual form, and she starts hacking through it with terrifying ease. Painfully aware of the small amount of time he has, Shudo takes stock of his injury and swears. "That's a lot of blood. Too much blood." It soaks the pant leg of his costume and pools on the floor. Arterial cut, his training supplies, and he fumbles to undo his belt. He needs to make a tourniquet, that's the word. The world goes fuzzy and his hands fumble on the blood-slicked buckle, at the same time the last bit of ice shatters. "Fuck," he mutters, dropping the belt and throwing up another feeble wall. It's worse than the last one. It's cold now, so cold, but his ice isn't working. He's never felt this cold in his life, but he keeps throwing whatever he can at the stranger. She laughs, wild and unhinged, the sound ringing in his ears. Oh, he realizes, I'm dying. This is what dying feels like. He feels surprisingly calm. Well, father, you wasted your time. The stranger breaks through his last pathetic ice wall, and Shudo watches with muted eyes as she raises her knife. There's no time for thought. Izuka sees the girl standing over Todoroki, knife in hand, and he just moves. Throwing himself forwards, he hooks his arms around her waist and tackles her into the collapsed display case. They collide in a tangle of limbs, and he barely manages to avoid a cut to the throat as she recovers and slashes wide with her knife. Teeth grit, he grabs her by the wrists and pins her. She screams, thrashing wildly, biting for his arms, but his grip doesn't falter. Footsteps behind them alert him to the hero student's entrance. Todoroki! Uraraka shrieks. Ashido follows suit, the two of them rushing over. How is he? He grunts, doubling down on his grip. Hell, she's strong. He can hear the panic in Ashido's voice. Blood, blood, there's a whole bunch of blood. He's conscious. It looks like she slashed an artery. Uraraka says. She sounds much more level-headed. We don't have much time. Todoroki, can you cauterize the wound? He can't, comes his weak response. Can't or won't? He snaps, sparing a look at him. He doesn't answer. Fucking make a tourniquet. His belt, he says, seeing the discarded leather lying in the snow, use your quirk to lift him out of here. Uraraka answers in assent, getting to work. Her hands are steady, and if they all get out of here alive, Izuku reminds himself to hug her for being the only competent hero student in 1A. Ashido is on the verge of tears. What do I do? Go ahead back to the others. If you see Eraserhead lead him here, there should be an evacuation, so ga. The breath is knocked from his lungs as the girl gets her legs under him, kicking him back with surprising strength. He loses his grip and rolls back as she cackles, swings again with her weapon. Izuku recovers, tensing in a crouch, and his opponent does the same. From the corner of his eye, he sees Uraraka and Ashido leaving with hopefully, unconscious Todoroki, belt cinched tight around his upper left thigh. Sensei says you're competent, and Ida says you're a hero, so, please be safe, Uraraka says, help will be here soon, so don't die. Izuku doesn't answer, just keeps his eyes on the intruder and dances back when she lunges. That's the plan. What's your name? He asks, hoping that she's stupid enough to allow him to buy some time. Most villains love to talk. She's no different. She smiles, and it looks like it'd be more at home on a serial killer's face than a teenage girl. Toga, but you can call me Himiko, QT-san. Toga tips her head to the side. They called you Midoriya. What's your given name? I only give that out to friends. Ah, don't be that way. We can be friends, Midican. She attacks. For a long stretch of seconds, the collapsed room is deadly silent, save for the crunch of snow underfoot and their labored breath. Unarmed, there's little more he can do than avoid being cut. Like he observed before, back in the waiting room, the stranger moves with scary efficiency, no movement wasted as she attacks. Throughout it all, she doesn't stop smiling, fangs bared. Izuku finds himself mimicking her expression. Slowly, but surely, his suspicions are confirmed by her pattern of attack. You're a Stain fan, he grunts, dipping back as a blade slices where his neck would be. Her eyes glint with glee. How did you know? Do you like Stain-sama too? You move real good, Midican. While I appreciated his message, he bends backwards, planting his palms in the snow. In one swift move, he snaps his legs up, the heel of his shoe kicks out, catching her extended hand. There's a metallic twang as he flips back onto his feet, the knife landing somewhere behind him in the store. He stands, fists readied. I couldn't get behind the whole killing hero's shtick. So I had to put him down. In an instant, her surprised expression twists into rage. You're lying, she shrieks, leading with a right jab. Izuku ducks and lands a hit of his own, right in her solar plexus. Toga grunts, stumbling backwards, but her guard is back up. She gasps, Endeavor took down Stain-sama. You're just a runt. Whatever helps you sleep at night. With a scream, she charges, and their deadly dance resumes. Even disarmed, Toga is a menace. She aims to incapacitate, to maim, and with rage backing her movements, her attacks are all the more vicious. He's nearly regretting it, but it's also making her sloppy. She lands a few painful blows, but Izuku retaliates with more. There's fresh bruises forming on her arms, legs, and midsection, each ugly blossom slowing her movements a little more. What's more, the cold is winning out. It seems that whatever her quirk does, it is unable to maintain her outfit, because she's basically naked. Izuku may be feeling the cold too, but he at least has a few layers to work with. Toga's movements grow sloppier, sluggish, her enraged grimace broken by chattering teeth. Izuku's not sure how long they've been fighting, it feels like hours, but it can only have been a couple minutes, when a third person enters the fight. His footing slips on ice, and he watches in slow motion as Toga throws a punch aimed right for his throat. But it doesn't land. He hands hard, tailbone singing with pain when he lands on tiles, and his opponent screams with inarticulate fury. Izuku blinks up at her, confused as to why his trachea hasn't collapsed, and falls back against the ground in relief. Just in time, he laughs. Eraserhead steps the rest of the way into the store, Quirk activated and captures Scarf bound tightly to the writhing villain on the floor. "You're going to give me gray hairs, kid?" Show Yuta deadpants, trying and failing to be angry. He will be later when all of this is said and done and he has all of his kids under one roof. But for now, Midoriya's brash actions and disregard for orders and his own safety has saved a life. "Worth it," his problem child mutters. Show Yuta cautiously approaches the girl on the floor. She's gone suspiciously quiet, and her struggling has stopped. She looks up at him with angry red eyes, and sticks out her tongue. "Boo. Go away, hobo man, you're just in the way." "You're under arrest," he says, flaring his quirk again for good measure. "Kuro Jirai," she whines, "I messed up, get me out." What? It's then that he sees the piece in her ear. Shoyuta yanks his capture weapon back, but it's too late. The smell of ozone floods the room, moments before a swirling, black portal opens up on the floor beneath her. He tries to reel her in, but the portal closes, and the last thing he sees before his capture scarf is ripped in two are two red eyes gleaming in the dark. "I'll be back for you, Midakan." Just like that, they're alone.